Banned content. It's cool, right? This forbidden fruit that's been kept away from the public, whisked away so that nobody can see it. There's an inherent mystery and intrigue with banned content, especially when it comes to banned content on social media. In this compilation video, I'm opening up the first volume of the Book of the Banned in its entirety. From YouTube to Reddit to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Airbnb, Uber, and YouTube again. Here are all 10 chapters of the first volume of the Book of the Banned. I really hope you enjoyed this video, whether you're rewatching them all or you're watching them for the first time. It's gonna be great. So with that said, let's get into it. You know, YouTube has the ability to be a place of creativity and ambition like no other. But let's be fair, some people take the absolute piss, and they often get taken out by the YouTube gods. In this video, I'm going to cover some of the most unique reasons YouTube channels have been terminated, and trust me, some of them are bonkers. Also, before we get into things, make sure to follow me on all of my socials if you enjoy my videos. Aside from that, let's get into things. So let's start off with one that you guys all might know. This is Shani for Christ, and if you don't know her, you're in for a real lesson today because a lot of these channels are incredibly niche. It was June of 2021 when Shani for Christ's channel was terminated, after a long slew of being abusive to her family. The first major incident that led to her eventual online demise came in 2019, after she was convicted of assaulting her former partner, a man by the name of Jason Egroff, better known as Rev. She allegedly slapped him across the face before attacking him with a whip. Don't feel too bad for him though, because 2 years later, while Shani was live streaming, he threatened to beat her child as they were all driving in the car together. To make matters worse, based upon the article I read on the situation, it's to my belief that her son was aged about 12 to 13 and was autistic. Not only was she abusive, but also was her partner, and this was too much for YouTube, who declared that these incidents breached their terms of service, and Shani for Christ was deleted, before being reinstated, and then once again swiftly deleted. She's since tried to come back on multiple occasions, but each time the door has been slammed in her face, and it appears as though Shani for Christ's YouTube career is over, gaining about 3,000 subscribers by the time of deletion, but being much more infamous than her sub count led on. So just to try and introduce you to the weirdness that you have to be putting up on YouTube in order for your account to be deleted, the next tale is of Shugo Charaboy, otherwise known as Tyler Jaffets. His channel would be erased from YouTube servers in August 2020 after reportedly using GoAnimate to make videos that promote child abuse, bullying, and even fetishes. Which, pause, can I ask, how did someone with only 1,800 subscribers at the time of his channel's deletion have this Wikitubia page with the works of Shakespeare about his controversies, history, and rivalries, and I can't get one? If there's one thing this video is going to do, it's going to get me a Wikitubia page. I demand one right now. I deserve it. I fucking need it. Anyway, rant aside. Having a look at the re-upload of this guy's videos, I can understand why he was terminated. You need to understand that he was making GoAnimate videos, but about like Swipe of the Fox, and there was frequent cursing and implied underage girls wearing skimpy clothing. The deal is that these videos would have very likely had a very large audience of children, and this content simply isn't appropriate for them. But something I found interesting during the research of this video is that there's actually a GoAnimate wiki which has described Tyler Jaffets, or Shugo Charaboy, as an abuser, stating, "He was seen by many involved as a horrible person with belly and man-child fetishes." So yeah, he's probably a nonce. Pause and read it if you care to. And don't think that this will be the last time we discuss GoAnimate in this video. This is only the tip of the iceberg. We have to go much deeper for the rest. So the next one is more of a group of channels that were all deleted around the same time, and for good reason. They are incredibly awful, the worst of the worst. It's almost hard to fathom how much of a villain you have to be to think that this would be an acceptable way of behaving. It's the pet rescue genre. So if you haven't heard of the pet rescue genre before, there's something that you have to understand. Some people care more for attention, YouTube success, and money than they do for defenseless animals. While on the surface these channels might seem very noble or wholesome, as we've seen on YouTube time and time again, often an entire genre has more than meets the eye. We saw it with family channels that exploit children for views. It happened with prank channels that faked content. It happened with primitive building channels for the same reason. But the reason that YouTube deleted a ton of pet rescue channels was that they weren't actually saving these pets, they were putting them in danger. You see, the premise of these channels were usually that there was an injured puppy or kitten, and someone would record themselves saving it from a situation and getting it back to full health. But unless the videos are user submitted or the channel belongs to a company like the RSPCA, which deals with this kind of situation every day, you cannot make a pet rescue channel because you just wouldn't run into injured puppies and kittens every day. So what did these guys do? They injured them themselves. Nick Crowley has a fantastic video on the topic, which I'll link in the description if you're interested in finding out more. But according to Wikitubia, there have been over 30 different channels that have been deleted for purposely putting animals such as dogs and cats in danger for the purpose of saving them on camera, making views, gaining subscribers and earning money. If you've seen my videos before, you might know my stance on it. I think you had to be sick in the head to do this kind of stuff, but unfortunately it does happen quite a lot. Podcast is the next creator I want to talk about, and straight up, this dude is infamous. His streams are definitely pushing the boundaries.
In all honesty, if I had the money, I would buy an Asian prostitute and bring it to America. I wouldn't teach her English at all. I'd keep her ass in the fucking house, just cook and clean.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff he says online. Now, according to my research, he was already very close to termination before he was eventually snuffed off the platform in November 2021, on account of his toxic and frankly racist fan base. But something would soon happen after to put the final nail in the coffin, and that was that he was apparently going to purge his Discord to get rid of all of the trolls, and then, and I quote, "After unmodding one of his mods, he failed to realise that the moderator had channel permissions, and the moderator took revenge by changing his channel profile picture to an asshole and uploaded the 2019 New Zealand mosque shooting, getting the channel permanently banned." Looking on YouTube, this guy did seem to have a very big cult following, but I guess that doesn't matter anymore because his channel is now lost to the earth, never to be revived. This is an interesting story. If you haven't heard of Dolly Flesh before, it's about to open up a big can of worms. So Dolly Flesh was a stop motion animator on YouTube and has been dubbed the internet's most disturbed animator. So what did he do that was that disturbed? Well, a lot of his art seems to be depictions of what many people thought were his fantasies, many of these being very graphic and violent. Much of his work included actions such as dismemberment, cannibalism, sexual assault, and even animal abuse. But not done in a way that might evoke subtlety, not that they're used in a larger narrative, in a way that glamorized them. And many people think that these are what he wanted to do, these were his fantasies. It was clear to see that he loved to see women in particular being gruesomely tortured or degraded. And speaking of torture, in 2021, Dolly Flesh was arrested after torturing and murdering his 3 pet hamsters, the method of which is extremely disturbed, and so the less said on the matter the better. Eventually, it was brought to the attention of Susan and the YouTube team, who decided that this art had to be erased from the site. In fairness, I think that all of the channels in this video that got terminated got what was coming to them. For example, our next entry. One of the most controversial figures in this video, Richard Spencer, is the subject of our next story. He had just shy of 3,000 subscribers on YouTube when he was terminated in June 2020. And while you might not know his channel, I'm sure you're aware of his work. And if you don't know what I mean, let me explain. While his name might not be that well known, he was one of the figureheads around the 2017 Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, a rally attended by white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and white nationalists, which ended in the deaths of 3 people. Now, I think it might be a bit easier to understand why YouTube decided that his voice on the platform needed to be taken away. Just by a simple look of his name up on YouTube, you'll be greeted with such gems as rebranding white nationalism, Richard Spencer wants to make white privilege great, watch Richard Spencer explain why he's not a Nazi, we memed the alt-right into existence, and my personal favourite, Africans have benefited from white supremacy. Wait, what? His beliefs are really full of shit, and again, he was a big figurehead in many of the biggest far-right movements over the past 5 years. It kind of makes sense that his channel was terminated. Speaking of full of shit, I really don't know where to begin on this one. On the 27th of March 2021, a channel by the name of Fuzzy Wuzzy was terminated from YouTube. It had about 1,600 subscribers at the time. Once I read its story, I knew I had to include it. The channel Fuzzy Wuzzy was deleted for its fetishes. So to get to the bottom of things, we had to go back to 2015 when it was created. 8 days after its inception, the owner of the channel uploaded a video titled Noisy Mess in Undies. And if I show you the channel icon, I think you can piece 2 and 2 together, but in case you can't, if I'm not mistaken, this was someone who was shitting their britches on camera and putting the videos up on YouTube. I don't know what it is, but I've been talking about kinks and fetishes way more recently on the channel than ever before. Kill me. The platform got catch of his deeds in 2020 after he uploaded a video called Huge Underwear Poop, and the following year, the swift hammer of YouTube struck upon Fuzzy Wuzzy, and his dookie empire was flushed down the toilet, as it were. Shay Gacha. This video is something else. So if you don't know who Shay Gacha is, or at least was because their channel has obviously been deleted, her channel gained a lot of popularity in the early months of 2021. For saying some of the most vile stuff you perhaps could. For one, she mocked both cancer and Tourette's, saying that they don't exist and that people need to stop faking them. She then uploaded videos of her beating up cancer patients and people with Tourette's in Gacha life. And of everything she's known for, this is probably the least bad. Trust me, it gets worse from here. It was the same year, 2021, where she started to gain attention online because after YouTuber Jacksepticeye's father passed away, she made videos mocking both the deceased and the bereaving, insulting Septiceye and his late father. These videos gained tens of thousands of views, and Shay Gacha gained a few thousand subscribers. This would arguably be topped though, because she then would argue that MAPs, or MAPs, I don't really know the acronym if you pronounce it MAP or not, were a good thing. And if you don't know what an MAP is, it stands for a minor attracted person. And yeah, she went on to support MAP Pride and was shortly terminated afterwards. Of course, she was very likely trolling. I can't think that anyone in the world is that obscene. At least I refuse to believe it. But in short, she was terminated for clearly violating YouTube's guidelines, nothing more to say on the matter. This was a termination for all the right reasons. So this next one, I really don't know how controversial this is going to be. I want to see your guys' reaction to this story. This is the story of Natasha Mail, and just like the pet rescue videos, she's just the tip of the iceberg of a much larger genre of YouTube video. So Natasha Mail was part of a genre of YouTube videos that has essentially been culled, and that genre is the breastfeeding niche. Now obviously people are going to have differing opinions on where and when new mothers can whip out the milk makers. I'm not going to touch that argument. But what about when it comes to not a new mother at all? So the deal is that it's going to be quite difficult to make content surrounding breastfeeding because first of all, YouTube's guidelines surrounding nudity are quite enforced, but you can only do it for a maximum of 2 years per child, right? Well, apparently wrong. Because despite most sources I've found online, such as the NHS and the American Academy of Pediatrics, stating that 6 months to about 2 years is the right time to stop breastfeeding, over the past 5 or so years, Natasha Mail and roughly 15 other channels have been terminated for breastfeeding older children. Breastfeeding my 9-year-old? Why? Inappropriate. And perhaps more worryingly, breastfeeding until 18 years? But you shouldn't worry too much because these are both kind of clickbait. She says that she'll stop when it feels natural to stop, and that will probably be around the age of 8. Now, it's 2022. Of course, I'm not going to be the one to tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body. I'd surely get cancelled. Oh, that was a tough legal battle. Personally, 8 is way too old. I would not want to be known as that kid that sucked his mum's tits until year 3. Absolutely not. But I'm probably the least able person to answer this question because I was bottle fed as a baby anyway. YouTube has tried to come down on her content, but every few months she keeps coming back with new channels. Oh yeah, and I should also mention that this is a fetish thing for some people because of course it is. If you search her name up, you'll find a bunch of playlists of women jugs exposed to the world. If you ask me, this is a bit of hullabaloo. So there's been a trend so far in this video that many members of the far right are recipients of YouTube's termination, and Baked Alaska is no different. He is an alt-right personality and white supremacist, and since we've already had one or two of these, I'll keep things brief. According to Wikitubia, he was terminated for posting a video in which he didn't stop harassing shop owners after being asked to wear a mask in October 2020. This might just be the tip of the iceberg though, no pun intended, because only 2 months later, he'd be involved in the January 2021 Capitol attacks, using the online service DLive to live stream the event, because his YouTube channel had been terminated. 16,000 people tuned in to watch his version of the events. If he did have a YouTube channel still, he likely would have streamed it there, so it might be for the best that he didn't. Especially since he was actually out on bail after pepper spraying a bouncer in December 2020. He was apprehended by the FBI a few days later after the Capitol attacks. And yeah, this was after his termination, but nonetheless I think it stands as a good example for the sort of behaviour that he was promoting. He was hit with violating the guidelines of hate speech and hasn't been seen on YouTube ever since. All 35,000 subscribers of his gone down the drain. Officer Poop 247, let's see what we have here. So he's actually best known for being featured in one of Mr. Beast's videos dedicated to bad YouTube intros, but he actually garnered a modest YouTube following before his eventual termination, creating none other than Go Animate videos revolving around the kid's cartoon character and everyone's least favourite bold 5-year-old, Caillou. Now, despite the fact that anyone creating Caillou content should be immediately struck from YouTube servers, Officer Poop did last a little while, but on the 20th of May 2018, the YouTube gods would smite him after he breached community guidelines not once, not twice, but thrice, and his channel was soon no more. Oh yeah, the reason that the next channel was terminated is clear as day. If you've never heard of Evaline, let me tell you a little story. In May 2016, YouTube decided to exterminate her from the platform after it was very clear that her controversial misdeeds would never cease. So what did she do then? Well, she was a straight up Nazi. Like, there was no doubt about it. She made vlogs talking about how Hitler did nothing wrong, which was surprisingly common back then. She made a bunch of videos about how to recognize Jews, and perhaps most bizarrely, she sung happy birthday to Hitler on 420 instead of taking a dank bong rip. So if you're questioning if she had her priorities straight, now you know for sure. It goes without saying that this dangerous way of thinking would be snuffed out by YouTube, but it's kind of scary to think that 60,000 people liked her views and opinions enough to subscribe. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and make sure I am beating this Nazi. Just make sure to hit that big red button, but if you're not convinced yet, let's get on with the rest of the video and hopefully eventually you will be. And if you don't subscribe, the Nazis win. I can't believe I just did that. There's been a recent development in the creator that I'm going to talk about next. His name is Ghetto ASMR, and his channel was terminated in June 2021 at about 128,000 subscribers for a long list of reasons that he's since spoken about on Twitch. And that development was that as of last week, he was also banned off TikTok. What might be the reason for his bannings? Well, let me describe it to you like this. When you're a creator that has the same level of success and fame that Ghetto ASMR had, even if you look like a soggy fucking pancake, you're going to have a lot of people of the opposite sex, or maybe even the same sex, DM you, slide into your DMs. And there have been a lot of creators over the years that have basically given up everything for a few moments of satisfaction. Ghetto ASMR was one of them. It's a tale as old as time online, and it's repeated itself once again. Apparently he uploaded an unlisted video and sent it to a fan. An unlisted video that featured his genitals. This would only be the tip of the iceberg though, because the guy has been accused of sexting multiple underage people, and his reputation towards women has been completely tarnished. Apparently the lad can't find a missus without using his platform to do so, and he was reportedly trying to find his #1 fan. Now, many of the times that he DM'd fans or asked for their nudes was after his channel's deletion, but nonetheless, it's not like he became a sex pest overnight. He was obviously doing it before his channel got the axe, and it was apparently the largest cause of his channel's termination. Speaking of classic YouTube stories, I think the sex pest and this next one really do go hand in hand as the most popular and the most played out. It's a classic story. Someone wants to be big on YouTube and they want it so bad that they forget about ethics and their judgment is clouded. They go balls to the wall in an attempt to achieve their goals, but eventually they're led astray and they cross the line one too many times, and then they just get shafted by YouTube, never reaching the promised land that they gave up everything for. Vorfi is the next YouTuber who got his channel deleted, and I think his Wikitubia entry on his deletion sums up in good words why he was deplatformed. Vorfi has been streaming a Fortnite fashion show since April 1st and practically brainwashes his viewers into subscribing, liking, using his code, donating money, and even worse, asking for viewers to become members. The actual stream is on a 30-minute loop and remains on forever. He also threatens his viewers to use the code or else they'll be kicked from the fashion show they desperately want to get into. So if I'm not mistaken things, this guy was basically extorting his child audience and cheating the system in doing so. It seems to me like he wanted power, he wanted fame, and he wanted money, and eventually it became too much, and he was terminated. So this next one I could have spoken about last time in my video about YouTube's criminal practices, which you should watch after this one, by the way, if you haven't already, but I decided to include it in this video instead. And that was a channel that was terminated in April 2021 called The Bell Life, which featured a pair of brothers, Justin Bell, aged 27 at the time, and Howard Bell, aged 44 at the time, who liked to prank each other. The only thing is that their pranks were ill-conceived and often very stupid, even for YouTube pranking standards where the bar is infamously an inch off the floor. The strange thing to me is that the prank that I think sealed the deal was performed in the latter months of 2016. It was driving a motorcycle through Walmart while scantily clad and wearing a cape. The two brothers were subsequently arrested for their actions and each faced a felony of wanton endangerment, and the video was eventually removed. But this doesn't explain why it would almost be half a decade later that their channel would be removed. Either way it was, and the pair had to move to a new channel. So audio listeners, you might want to divert your eyes to the screen right now. Let's just watch a clip right now. I'm not going to say anything, and wonder to ourselves why this channel might have been terminated from YouTube. Okay, yeah, I know I said that was the reason he got banned. It actually wasn't, at least according to his Wikitubia. According to his Wikitubia, he's apparently not a man of that inclination, but also according to his Wikitubia, he's 17 years old. So that makes it two hard things to believe. Now, you might be out here saying, oh, wow, Fox, you're just going hard on this guy. Why are you out here calling him a nonce? And no, it wasn't the fact that he apparently made George Floyd gaming. Nah, this guy made a video titled, I Hate British People. Long-term viewers, you know, racism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, I'll give them all a pass under specific circumstances, but Anglophobia is not a joke. Millions of people suffer every year. We will not be oppressed for any longer. I have a Discord linked in the description. If you want to join the cause, click on it, join it. The British people and all of our allies will not be silenced a moment longer. That's all I have today, comrades, so please let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see me do next, because I'm only 121 videos in, and I'm already out of ideas. Thank you very much for watching, God save the Queen! I think that everyone with an internet router and a mouse has heard of Reddit, and of those, everyone with about 2 brain cells knows that at times it can be quite a dark and disturbing place. In this video, we're doing a deep dive down the most distressing, depressing, and disturbing deleted communities that Reddit has to offer. Each of these communities is no longer with us, and we're going to investigate just a few of the most unique and controversial communities and uncover why. This video comes after my Terminated YouTube channel's video and is part of a brand new series I'm calling The Book of the Banned. And one last thing before we get into this, please make sure to check out and follow my socials if you enjoy my content. Aside from that, let's get into the video. So let's start off with one that might encapsulate what a lot of people think about Reddit when they hear the name. This is r/cringe anarchy. Now, with all of these communities, they all have a shtick, an initial premise that in some cases was already asking to be banned, and in others were corrupted over time. Cringe Anarchy was the latter, initially detaching from r/cringe, a community that is still alive and thriving today. The difference between the Cringe and Cringe Anarchy communities, though, was that Cringe Anarchy was meant to be much less moderated, more free, less censored, hence the anarchy in the name. In theory, potentially a good idea. I need to preface this video by saying that I am against almost all forms of censorship unless it's really needed. But a small minority would take this newfound freedom a bit too far, as the subreddit started taking a dramatic political shift to the far right. It started calling everything that didn't fit in with its ideology SJW cringe, predominantly making memes that would target LGBT and Muslim people. This carried on until something shocking would happen. On the 15th of March 2019, inside Christchurch, New Zealand, a man by the name of Brent Harrison Tarrant will commit 2 consecutive mass shootings targeting Muslim individuals. And following this, anti-Muslim posts only accelerated within the community. Just a month later, on the 25th of April, Reddit had finally had enough and decided to axe the community, as well as several others, whilst the rest of Reddit watched. Just an FYI, this will not be the last time we talk about Christchurch in this video. It actually pops up quite a few times. There were several communities, as I said, that were being banned because of the incident. It's now been over 3 years since the death of cringe anarchy, and it has never been revived. r/fat people hate. Now, while the name might be a bit self-explanatory, let me explain it. So some people really hate fat people. Like, they despise overweight individuals enough to create an entire online community with the sole purpose of mocking, harassing, bullying, and laughing at people that have packed on the pounds. Mostly women, which I find especially strange. I didn't know there was a gender preference when it came to the overweight, but apparently overweight women especially got the brunt of the hate. It also had an astounding amount of activity within it when compared to its subscriber count, with these subscribers taking their attacks onto other subreddits apparently being spurred on by a lot of members thinking that bashing on overweight individuals was normal, thinking that it was the status quo, and many members soon started seeping out of the community to ridicule the robust on relatively related Reddit communities. The worst thing was that many of the people that were featured on this Reddit were exes or enemies of those posting. These were personal attacks targeted towards many people that were of a perfectly normal weight, just being motivated by a personal vendetta. This would all culminate on the 1st of June 2015. I like to call this the day that r/fat people hate died, because this was the day that size 22 model Tess Holliday was featured on the front of People magazine. According to the members of r/fat people hate, this was the straw that broke the camel's back, because now the normalization of fat people had gone completely mainstream. It was all over the media and they were not happy about it. And 9 days later, on the 10th of June 2015, r/fat people hate was designated too dangerous to be kept alive and was struck from Reddit's record book, never to return again. Despite literally dozens of attempts, it's been banned every single time. Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer right here because we're going to need one. This is where the video gets controversial because we're about to delve into some extremist political subjects. I'm not playing sides, I try my best to balance things out because this is not a political channel whatsoever. It just so happens that some communities have been banned a bit more than others, right? So please give me the chance to do so before you leave a deluded hate comment. You don't know my political leanings, right or left, and I don't care. If you are an extremist with a deluded opinion, you're probably not going to like the rest of this video. Let's just be adult about this, right? We can disagree, that's fine. With that said, r/incels. The tale of incels is actually quite sad to me. So if you don't know what an incel is, apparently it's described as someone 21 or over who has not had a romantic partner within the last 6 months. I'm sure that a lot of people watching this video, based solely on that definition, now have realized that you're actually technically an incel. You're part of the crew. But really, being an incel, at least the ones that I'm going to talk about, it's more of a state of mind than just when was the last time you got laid. They believe in the black pill ideology, and the idea of this is that women are useless, they're sluts, they have no use in society, they're evil. Long story short, these men hate women, they despise them, but really for one reason, and that's that they're not getting any. And so they've declared women as the enemy, as well as normies, simps, and chads who they desperately want to be like, because they get all the girls. As well as myself, and now Reddit, included on that long list. Because in the summer of 17, Change.org started a petition to ban r/incels, which was acted upon on November 7th. The subreddit had roughly 40,000 subscribers at time of termination, which dispersed into several other communities. the most popular being r/brain cells, which was terminated a few months later after the 2018 Toronto van attack, in which many members of its community praised the attacker's motives and actions. It's harrowing stuff, it really is. Now, everyone knows what incels are, but I do quickly want to go and cover r/MGTOW, which is an acronym for men going their own way. And this is actually something I've just learned whilst making this video. So I knew that there was a group of radical feminists that wanted to separate living spaces for the genders, but apparently there are quite a few radical meninists or incels or just men, I don't know what group they're attached to, that want to do the same thing. They think that society has been so corrupted by women and feminism that men and women actually have to call it quits and separate. I mean, I think it's mental. Enough said. This one was banned after apparently the authors of the subreddit got caught up in some real life violence, and when you have so much hate in your heart, I think it's only par for the course. Again, I just wanted to make that quick little footnote there. That's a thing that exists, I had no idea. Now, incels get much more coverage by the media, but a group you might not have heard so much about is femcels, or in the case of this video, r/femcel. This is the female equivalent of the incel, involuntarily celibate women who are very likely celibate right now because of their toxic, man-hating personality. Now, I read online that since the termination, many of them have moved over to a website called The Pink Pill, the female equivalent of the black pill for incels, and I thought it would be a good idea to head over there to try and get a taste for what these women were saying, a flavour for why they were banned. Bro, I had no clue that this online underbelly existed. Like, there were several severely radicalized women that just wanted to see men being tortured and die in painful ways. It was mental. They have many huge problems with men in general. One of the biggest ones is that they think that they're all hideously ugly. And I might not be the best counter argument against that, but I'll tell you right now, there are some hot guys out there. They think that in the modern day men bring no value to the table, they think that they're sex pests, they think that if they do a nice thing for a woman it's just because they want to sleep with her, they think that they're all nonces, they think that men are solely attracted to 21 to 25-year-old women. There was a lot of transphobia in there, but to me most shockingly of all was that there was a lot of straight up racism in there. I was not expecting race to come into things, but there are a few races that these women did not like. Luckily I'm fine, but also I'm a man so they wouldn't like me anyway. At least I'm only single Dutch, not double Dutch. As you can expect, the reason that they were banned was for promoting hate. A lot of them had just had bad dating experiences, but that's no excuse for radicalization, ladies. The scariest thing is that they think for certain that they're right, but Reddit didn't think so, and in January 2021, it let them know. Femcels have had to abandon ship, being found on the Pink Pill, as I said before, but also r/female dating strategy and r/against men's rights. Yeah, that's a thing, look it up. And just like with incels, I'm gonna do just a quick one right here. This is r/gender critical, which is similar to femcels, but instead of targeting most of their attention towards men, gender critical focuses more on trans women, people who were born as biological men but have since identified as women. And similar to how femcels fled over to a new site once its subreddit was shut down, so did the members of Gender Critical, who went over to a site named Over It, which is a good name, I have to give it that, but they still have a severe distaste for trans people, and they're still also sexist too. They still hate men, and again, broke Reddit's rules for hate speech. But doing research on these groups has really opened my eyes. I knew that radical feminists existed, I guess I just never really cared about them. To know that these are the views of many of their members is really new information to me. So that is the gendered portion of this video done, it's finished. Now on to race.
12 seconds later.
There's a lot of horribly racist subreddits. Many of them I cannot even say the name of because if I did, this would surely be my last video. Oh wow, look at this cute picture of a family on Christmas morning all in matching onesies. Oh, this is so cute. Imagine not being extremely disgusted by this. That's the kind of stuff that's in a lot of them. It's actually quite hard to find many that are suitable for this video because all of the ones that are still active are just ineligible. I can't include them, and a lot of them have been deactivated, and therefore it's very difficult to find archives of them. It's online racist content. It goes without saying that it's there. everyone's seen it. Let's just move on to something a bit more obscure, right? So we're heading back to 2020 for this next story. This is r/no new normal. I mean, I remember seeing these conspiracy theories coming way outside Reddit. They seeped into the furthest corners of the internet, but they were always underpinned by the fact that we were never going to go back to how life was before the pandemic. I mean, things are always changing. 2014 wasn't the same as 2018. 1999 wasn't the same as 2005. 1986 wasn't the same as 1992. Cultures, trends and customs are always going to move forward, and some things that we got from COVID are just going to go ahead. Stuff like working from home, Zoom call meetings, mask wearing, they're probably in our life forever now. The crux of no new normal was that lockdowns, mask wearing and vaccines were a form of social control. To be honest, this entry would be better suited for people in say 20 years, because everyone watching right now in 22, we all know it. We all know these conspiracy theories. We all know that there were a lot of theories over there being something in the vaccine, over the idea that lockdowns were the start of a new precedent. I mean, I think it's a bit early to say if that's going to be true, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm not locking down for another second of my life. But a lot of what people there were saying was deemed to be spreading misinformation, especially when it came to the vaccines, with the subreddit being ironically quarantined on the 12th of August 2021 and terminated on September 1st. 54 similar COVID denial subreddits were also quarantined in one of the largest purges in Reddit history. Oh man, the hypocrisy for this next story is absolutely laughable. On the 15th of August 2017, there was a subreddit removed for allegedly inciting violence, and the name of that subreddit was r/physical removal. Now, while its name doesn't give away exactly what it stands for, I think you might be able to hazard a guess that there's a desire for separation. And in the case of the physical removal community, it was the want of separation between the political left and right. This community was populated by members of the far right, and its subreddit's name stems from a quote by right-wing libertarian philosopher Hans Hermann Hoppe, who wrote, "There can be no tolerance towards Democrats and communists in a libertarian social order. They will have to be physically separated and removed from society." Does the physical removal of your political opponents not sound eerily similar to something that happened 80 years ago prior to one of the greatest tragedies in human history? If you want the forced deportation of people who think politically different to you, you don't want a democracy, you want a dictatorship led by your party. The best thing about the political pendulum is that it always swings back one way or the other. No one has power for too long. But by ostracizing people that think differently to you, you're setting scary precedents which we have seen before. Where does it stop? Just politics? Does anyone have some blonde hair dye and blue contact lenses I can stick in? Yeah, it's no surprise that this community got the axe. It happened after the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, after people mocked the late Heather Heyer, who died in a white supremacist terrorist attack. Of all of these entries, this one really did sit with me the wrong way. But I want to flip the script for a second, because it's not just the right that do this, the left are also just as guilty too. r/Chapo Trap House is the next subreddit I want to talk about, because this community has got quite an interesting story to it. It was the 29th of June 2020 when Reddit came down on r/Chapo Trap House, a subreddit dedicated to initially discussing the long-running left-wing podcast of the same name, founded in 2016. Over the years, it grew in popularity, with one of the central points being that left-wing ideology needed to be achieved by any means necessary, whether that be done morally or perhaps immorally for the greater good. During my research, I was able to find a long list of reasons why this subreddit was banned, including advocating for the assassination of congressmen, advocating for the genocide of white people, advocating for the idea that conservatives are evil and deserve violence done to them, saying that conservative figures such as John McCain and Bush Sr. deserve to die, defending Catholics being murdered in the Spanish Red Terror, saying that all policemen and all landlords deserve to die, and so on and so forth. So after all of this talk and all of these threats, Reddit decided to pull the plug on basically all extremist political groups, and that's where we are today. Most of them have been taken down. So let's try and get into something a little bit less controversial, because I feel like the dislikes are going to be coming in thick and fast. Hopefully we can all agree on this one. r/shoplifting. This was a subreddit dedicated to shoplifting practices. How to do it, tips not to get caught, questions and answers about it, stories recounting first-hand experiences doing it, and the rest. Anything that you could want to know about shoplifting was here in this thieves' paradise. Now, to be fair to the subreddit, they did promote shoplifting exclusively at larger chained brands rather than small businesses, because obviously the Walmarts and Targets of the world would definitely not feel the effects of stolen goods as much as small local businesses that might only be scraping by. But with that said, to assume that everyone that participated in the community would solely shoplift at large chains would be perhaps a bit naive. And that's not even to mention that there's a clear moral argument that if something isn't yours, if you haven't paid for it, you have absolutely no right to take it without permission. It's theft, it's illegal, and it's no surprise that a subreddit that was literally promoting petty crime was erased from Reddit after failing to meet the most basic expectations that a subreddit must fulfill on the forum. If you want to be able to sleep tonight, I would recommend not researching what we're about to talk about next. This is going to be a bit of a tricky one to edit because it might just be a blurred screen for like the next minute or so. It's r/gore. This subreddit was eventually terminated in March 2019 after footage from the Christchurch attack was uploaded, similar to r/cringeanarchy, which I spoke about earlier. If you can't guess, this subreddit was dedicated to former US Vice President and runner-up in the 2000 election Al Gore, whose political policies, especially those in reference to Man Bear Pig, were designated too dangerous to be kept up on the site. And what do you mean? What's flaying? Okay, apparently I was wrong. This subreddit was not dedicated to former US Vice President Al Gore, but instead about people getting horribly mutilated. Apparently it was breaching Reddit's rules for violent content, possibly promoting violence or dangerous situations. I mean, in fairness, if you click on a subreddit called r/gore, you're gonna see some wild stuff. But then again, I guess decapitated heads and severely destroyed bodies are going to need some serious moderation. And there definitely would have been a lot of people in that subreddit just lurking around that love to see people horribly injured and mutilated, and that kind of stuff just can't fly. More on that point, there shouldn't really be any questions of why this next one was banned. Even if you don't agree with it, you'll know why. r/watch people die. I mean, here's the thing. If you want to go on the internet and watch people die, there's no one stopping you. There's plenty of places that show that kind of content. Obviously, LiveLeak has shut down a short while ago, but it's the internet. If you can think of it, you can find it. Reddit deemed back in March 2019 that it wasn't going to be the go-to site for people to watch people's lives literally end in horrible shock accidents, and once again, this was due to Christchurch, which I really didn't know had such a massive effect on Reddit, but it seems as though once it happened, they seriously started to buckle down, throwing out bans and terminations at an accelerated rate. The community's discussion subreddit, WPD Talk, was also caught in the crossfire and was terminated at the same time. It was deemed, just like the Gore community, that keeping this up might be promoting violence, and again, there would have been a lot of people that were just lurking around this subreddit that would have really liked to see people die in horrible, tragic ways. It's kind of scary to think about. And for this reason, Reddit decided that it was time for people to watch people die. You know, so far in this video, we've been looking back at communities that have been closed down, but right now, I want to look ahead to the future, to subreddits that might be banned one day. These are going to be subreddits that might never close, but have definitely drawn in a lot of criticism since their inception. So the first one is r/anti-work. And this is a very strange community. It's dedicated to people who despise their jobs and want to live a work-free life. Most of the posts that perform best are the ones where people call out their bosses and storm out into a life of independence and freedom and potential financial struggles. It's segregated itself from differing political views because it won't allow any right-wing, authoritarian or pro-capitalist content being posted. It's obviously a group deeply rooted in Marxism, and I honestly don't know if it will ever get banned from Reddit, or even if it should. On the one hand, r/anti-work might seem absolutely terribly lazy and completely lack vision, because if everyone quit their jobs, the world would cease to function. But on the other hand, some bosses really need to be called out, and we all know that minimum wage jobs suck. I would know, I've had first-hand experience. The subreddit gained a massive following during the pandemic, now with over 2 million members, with a large reason of this being that people seem just very apathetic about the notion that if they work all day, every day, they'll ever get anywhere in their career. I think this one is unlikely to be banned because it has strict rules on harassment and calling for violence against employers, but you never know. And while I don't think that r/anti-work will ever get removed from Reddit, I do think that r/piracy will eventually get the axe. Because if you're going to remove r/shoplifting from Reddit, you have to kind of do the same for the virtual equivalent. It was created in 2008 and is still active despite receiving dozens upon dozens of DMCA takedown notices. And because of this, the website is constantly being purged of old content because it has links to illegal streaming websites. As easy as piracy is, at the end of the day, it is theft. Now, I'm not going to go and say I've never pirated anything in my life. I am no angel, I am no saint. Not by a long shot, but creating a subreddit dedicated to theft is just ludicrous. In the about, it states, piracy is ethical, to which I say, is it fuck? Again, this guy has pirated stuff in the past. You're lying to yourself. I know that Disney, Netflix, Apple and Amazon have all the money in the world, but what about the smaller, more niche production companies? What about the true works of art of our time? What about the crew behind the camera, like a first-time director with promise? If a movie flops badly because it's been pirated a lot, it's not going to look good on their CV, they might not get another chance. Big production companies such as Disney are still going to make money on their movies in merch alone. Smaller companies and indie films just won't. I'm somewhat of a filmmaker myself, so this one does irk me personally, but again, I don't want to be a hypocrite and say that it's this worst thing in the world because I have done it in the past. Doesn't mean you should promote it. It's a bad thing. I feel guilty every time I do it. And again, I'm against censorship, so I really don't know if this one should be deleted. I just hope that people don't pirate everything they watch. And if things in this video couldn't get any more controversial, let's talk about r/Herman Cain Award, which is horrendously spiteful. This subreddit was created in September 2020 and its name is a play on the Darwin Award, which in case you don't know is alluding to the theory of natural selection, how historically only the strong and powerful chosen by nature survive, but in the modern day, stupid people die early by doing stupid things. The Herman Cain Award, in contrast, is more focused on COVID, and essentially every time someone who said COVID wasn't real, or refused to wear a mask or get the vaccine, then got sick and died, they would be mocked in the community. The biggest example of this is Herman Cain, the American businessman who denied COVID's existence, was strongly anti-mask, and eventually caught COVID and died from it. Obviously, this is where the group gets its name. The weird thing to me is how this page is still very active when COVID is nowhere near as dangerous or as deadly as it was. And so if it wasn't banned back then, I severely doubt it will now, because at this point, COVID deniers have either died or caught it and got the antibodies and will be less likely to die compared to a year or so ago. I mean, people still die from COVID, don't get me wrong, but this is just something that we have to learn to live with now. Either way, laughing at the deceased is horrible and it doesn't make you a good person. Even if you're violently against everything they stand for, it makes you a dick too if you stoop to their level. It's just something to think about. I think that out of all the video sharing platforms, Twitch is the most notorious for throwing out bans willy-nilly, and these usually come in the form of temporary suspensions, but every now and then they throw the book in and give creators permanent bans. In this video we're doing a deep dive into Twitch lore to uncover some of the most interesting, weird and controversial reasons why various Twitch streamers have been banned. And this is definitely not because I'm planning to start streaming come the end of September, and therefore you should totally follow me on my Twitch to see my live streams as well as my other social medias. With that said, let's get into things. And I think you guys would have my head on a platter if I didn't talk about the infamous Dr. Disrespect. The video just wouldn't be the same if I didn't touch on the most famous permanent banning of all time. Now, I was never a very big Dr. Disrespect fan, so I took to the internet to try and find out why he was given the boot. And that's when I found this answer from Steve Garcia, profile picture of a pancake, so you already know that this is going to be a reputable source. And he said this:
Doc got what he deserved for showing his feet on stream. I saw several instances of him being barefoot in clips I saw on YouTube, and I was really disgusted, especially when I saw that clip of him showing his left sole for a few seconds while reacting to another clip. First, Beam is a fucking 39-year-old. Second, his jock outfit makes him look uglier with the mustache and wig, but I've never watched his streams nor reported him. I hate seeing adults and ugly-looking individuals barefoot. Alinity and XQC deserve permabans for the same reason.
So Pancake Garcia just murdered this dude, but he was wrong. His crusty feet weren't the actual reason he was banned. Probably. And I say probably because the real reason is just shrouded in mystery. So we have to take things back to the first half of 2020 because this is where our story begins. Dr. Disrespect signed a deal with Twitch to keep him on the platform for a few years. Apparently this deal was worth 8 figures, and it was immediately thrown into the flames of hell as he was then banned for violating community guidelines on the 26th of June. So he was banned, but initially nobody, not even Dr. Disrespect, knew why. It was about a year later in August 2021 when he finally gave people an update on the situation, saying that he now knew why he was given the ban and had known for several months. And the reason was just cause to sue the shit out of Twitch for damages. Due to the incident, Disrespect's income was allegedly slashed by about 75%. He wasn't allowed to stream with the same people anymore due to him now being on YouTube. He lost out on connections and brand deals, and so he took them to court, with the former Twitch streamer coming out in March of this year to state that while no side admitted any wrongdoings, the legal battle was over, leaving it at that. I really wish that I could go more into detail, but as with a lot of things in Dr. Disrespect's life, the entire thing was just shrouded in mystery. Perhaps for legal reasons more than anything else, but it has to be said that this entire ordeal must have been a very tough pill to swallow for the doctor. I think we should stick on the topic of lawsuits for our next story, and things are about to get really juicy. We're about to talk about the streamer known as Phantom Lord. And I'll be honest, of all the people featured in this video, I kind of feel like Phantom Lord is the least likely to come back to Twitch. He and the company have some serious beef together. So let's take things back to the year 2016, a nostalgic time for sure. Before hundreds and thousands of online scandals had taken place, people started to notice online gambling. It was the idea that if you pay a video game a bit of money, you'll have a chance of potentially getting a really good character, skin, weapon, or advantage, or you might get nothing. I'll be honest, I fell hard for FIFA microtransactions when I was 14. I didn't know any better. And essentially these video games were gambling for under 18s, but this wasn't really known, at least not at mainstream level. Well, this guy, Phantom Lord, was a bit of a naughty boy because he was promoting a bit of online gambling to his audience. He was a CSGO streamer, and for this reason, he was promoting a site called CSGO Shuffle, which by looking at it on the Wayback Machine seemed literally just like a gambling site. Here's the thing, and it might be a bit of a surprise to you though, as it turns out, it's generally accepted that Phantom Lord had a connection to the site that he was promoting. He had a bit of skin in the game. Whether that be financial incentives to promote it or if he actually owned it, we've never been told, but it's agreed that he has had ties to CSGO Shuffle. I believe that this was never disclosed with his audience, and so Twitch then went and permabanned him from their site. But here's where things take a sharp left turn, because by doing so, they actually broke their own contract with him. It said that they had to give him 30 days notice if they were going to ban him. They gave him 0. And so Phantom Lord did the American thing and he took them to court to sue the living shit out of them. It would take 3 years for a verdict to come out of this trial, and despite what you might think, he actually won against the company. Kind of. He and his team initially asked for between $15 and $100 million in damages, soon going down to 12 million and then soon back up to 63 million. And so with such a high asking price, what did he actually walk away with in the end? Well, he actually got 20,000. A far cry away from the 63 million he wanted, but a win nonetheless. Since the events, Phantom Lord has been less frequent in online spaces, but every time he feels as though someone's been unjustly treated by Twitch, he often offers to get his legal team to help out, with Twitch forevermore being his mortal enemy. So a former president of the United States is not the kind of guy that you would assume might get banned on Twitch for some reason, right? Our next story is probably one of the weirdest, if not the weirdest, in this entire video, and that's saying something. So apparently Donald Trump has been permanently banned off Twitch. And I know it sounds like I'm pulling your leg, but according to several reputable online sources such as The Verge, Forbes, TechCrunch, and many more, they reported back in January 2021, just as he was handing power over to Joe Biden, that Twitch had decided that Donald Trump was no longer allowed on the platform. I didn't even know that he had a Twitch account. I don't think he was going live very often. Now, according to a White House leak, I've actually received insider information. And that was that in response to this, Donald Trump, when he found out, replied, "Oh man, that's totally not POG." Of course, the true reason behind his banning was the 2021 Capitol attacks, where thousands of people stormed the US Capitol buildings to try and stop the transition of power between Trump and Biden. As a result of these events, in which many people believe were spurred on by the former president, he was essentially blacklisted from every major social media site, with his Twitter account more famously being permanently removed. Twitch had the same idea though and said that this was the reason that they removed his account. The only remnants of it are on the Wayback Machine, but I don't know if it's just my crap internet or something, but none of the pages could load for me. Either way, that's the story of how Donald Trump himself, 45th President of the United States, got perma-banned from Twitch. I mean, I'm sure I've spoken about Donald Trump in passing in recent videos, but so have I about this next streamer, Zillion OP. And his name is infamous. If you know his story, you know how absolutely bonkers it is. Things are about to get wild. His story might just be the most famous of all of these that I'm going to include here, with videos from SunnyV2 and Wavy Web Surf garnering millions of views. It's also one of the oldest stories today, and if you don't know this story, things are about to get real interesting. So in mid-2012, this man right here, Zillion OP, made a Twitch account where he'd stream various video games with a fairly substantial audience in and around the 300 viewers mark. Now, while his content might have just been of a plainly higher quality than many of the other people on Twitch at the time, it's fair to say that a big reason that he had so many active viewers on each stream was that Zillion OP was wheelchair bound, and it was a big part of the draw to his channel. He said that in 2011 he was involved in a serious car accident, and therefore had to be in a wheelchair, or so his audience thought. Because in April 2013, the trajectory of his online career would take a dramatic turn, when suddenly, just like a miracle, he got up out of his wheelchair and began to walk. This was before realizing that his ruse had been exposed, shifting the camera down, turning the stream off, and lying, saying that he fell out of his wheelchair and that he had injured himself in doing so. As it turns out, this was not a miracle, but instead Zillion OP had been lying to his audience. People flocked to see that, yes, he was using his disability as a way to earn money from people donating to a man that they thought was truly disabled. Twitch banned him and he was soon forgotten about online. Until 2020, when the aforementioned Wavy Web Surf interviewed him and he spilled the beans on the situation. So as it turns out, things were more shades of grey than they might have first appeared, because apparently he was actually injured at a point in time. Zillion OP was injured when he created his Twitch account. The problem was that between the time that he created his Twitch account and the time that he got exposed for walking, he had actually been in rehabilitation, but he failed to disclose this with his audience. So it wasn't like he was lying, but rather withholding the truth, if you know what I mean. And I think that he started to think that if he just stayed in the wheelchair, then people would give him more money, which they did. So, fraud? Yes, at a point in time, but not initially. Everyone that donated to him got their money back, but Zillion, as well as another account that he made years later, were given permabans. A lovely, morally dubious story with a lot of twists and turns, for sure. If you don't know who Saw Carl is, the next story might be a bit tough to understand due to the massive, glaring oversights that this Twitch streamer made, but if this video is going to prove anything to you, it's that Twitch streamers consistently make massive, glaring oversights. This was one of the biggest. So our story takes place in March 2020 when Call of Duty streamer Saw Carl was intoxicated on stream. As you can see right there, he had a can of Coors out and he was playing around with a suspectingly unloaded gun. I think you can see where this is going because as it turns out, in truth, he did actually have a bullet inside this gun. The streamer didn't know this though and shot the gun at his metal cup at an extremely close range, with the bullet ricocheting and subsequently destroying a monitor. This would be the moment that his career would essentially die, because he was kicked out of the Saw clan, leaving him now known as just Carl. He acknowledged that what he did was incredibly irresponsible and that it could have ended up with someone being injured or worse, but Twitch did not seem to care and his account is still down to this very day. It's a short story for sure. Luckily, no one was actually injured in the firing, but Twitch saw this as grounds to permanently take away his account. Twitch definitely seems like it's been ramping up its bans and suspensions this year, with the main character of our next story being banned from the platform in March. Online, he goes by the name Destiny, and he got banned for a similar reason as many of the people in my banned YouTube channel's video, and that was his views towards certain groups of people, or in the words of Twitch, promoting, encouraging, or facilitating the discrimination or denigration of a group of people based on their protected characteristics. The group itself is unknown to the public and might even be unknown to Destiny himself. Destiny believes that he was banned because of his views on trans athletes, a debate that is becoming more and more popular with every passing year. The idea being that if someone was born a biological male and then transitions to become female, they should not be allowed to compete with biological females, because being born a biological male, you're going to be given so many more attributes and just biological factors that are going to help you dominate in sport. It would essentially ruin women's sport. That was his opinion, and that's why he thought he got permabanned. But it might also have been because he invited Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist, onto his stream, and Nick Fuentes has already been permabanned from Twitch, so it might have been because he actually took someone that was permabanned and put him on Twitch again. Fuentes himself was also recently implicated in an uptick of hate raids against women and LGBTQ+ streamers on Twitch. Due to the Fuentes debate occurring shortly before Destiny was banned, many theorised that this was the reason that he was given the boot. But really, we don't have a definite answer, and going on half a year since his permaban, Twitch haven't gone back on their decision, and Destiny remains not allowed on the platform. So to my knowledge, Darius IRL is one of the smaller streamers that I'm going to include in this video. There's a good chance you haven't heard of him. And on top of this, his ban is fairly recent, only happening in July of this year. It's also one of the more interesting stories in this video, so we're going to have to backtrack a little bit to find out why he's no longer allowed on Twitch. So to provide you with some context, he was actually permabanned a few days before he was permabanned yet again. He was let back onto the platform eventually, but initially he was permabanned because he rapped the N-word in a song. You might see dropping the N-bomb as clearly violating Twitch's terms of services. Easy ban. But it's not that simple, because from sources I've read, Darius IRL is half black. Now, by looking at my complexion, you can probably hazard the guess that I'm not the right kind of guy to say who gets the pass and who doesn't. I don't know if you have to be all black, I don't know if you have to be half black or mostly black, or maybe even not black at all to say this earth-shattering word, this titan, this fast track to cancellation. So I decided to watch a panel of black people talk about the word, and I'm still no closer to understanding. It seems as though saying this word is subjective, it depends on the person, it depends on the context. But maybe Twitch knows, because he was granted his account back after he posted pictures of his ancestors on Twitter. I mean, I don't know how far back these people are, but it's fair proof, and he was granted his account back. For now, because only a few days later he was given yet another permaban, this time for breaching sexually explicit content, and this time was a lot more clean cut, but not for the reason that you might think, because he didn't really actually do anything. He watched a video that you can find on YouTube called Pretty Ricky Late Night Special. And the video is essentially of 5 guys gyrating in the air. The dance that they're doing is obviously suggestive, yes, but Darius IRL brought up a very good point that when it's compared to some of the stuff that's going on Twitch, what he was watching was very, very tame. Definitely not warranting a perma ban, and to be honest, I have to agree with him on this. I don't really know too much about his content outside of his bannings, and without saying my stance on nudity or near-nude content on Twitch, if you're going to ban him for watching that, you're going to have to permaban a lot of people. As he said on Twitter, some people literally have ass cams out there, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, but if you deem this over the line, then you have to remain consistent, right? Or maybe you don't. I don't know. What do you guys think? Either way, 2 months later after being kicked out of Twitch, he has not been let back inside. Hey guys, this is Fox Post Edit, and I want to back up my point by saying something that happened last night. This guy here, Prezzo, he's a big streamer. Last night, he came in really drunk, butt naked, on stream, live on stream. He thought he turned it off. He came in butt naked and got into bed. You saw everything. Here's a question. How long does Prezzo get banned for? 3 days. And I'm not saying that he should be banned for any longer, but again, I am saying there's inconsistencies in what Twitch was doing there. I thought I should just mention that because it's a wild Twitch story that happened just last night, but either way, let's carry on with the rest of the video. I think that it's appropriate if we carry on talking about the topic of sexually suggestive Twitch streamers because they've been a very big part of the platform for a good few years now. It's almost like a little identity of Twitch. And it's not just the people that react to adult content that Twitch has a problem with, but it's also some of the people that do it that come under heavy fire, as what happened to IndieFox in 2021. It's to my understanding that over the years, Twitch has become a little bit more relaxed on this kind of thing, but even then, every now and then you will still see that they're sticklers for purity, and IndieFox's content was anything but pure. I don't know how much of this I'll be allowed to show because while YouTube is a little bit more relaxed on this stuff, it's really not by much. Long story short, IndieFox kept creating the suggestive content which Twitch had a really big problem with, and therefore bans were frequent. At one point before her permaban, she was banned 6 times in just as many months. So once her career got the final curtain call, it must have not been too much of a shock. Essentially, she was banned for her content, which is a bit strange again, because there are a lot of Twitch streamers that do basically the exact same thing and face no repercussions. This was just an example of someone that did it and eventually did get a permanent ban from the site. There's not really too much of a story there, but I thought I had to include someone who was banned from Twitch because of their sexually suggested content, because it has become such a big part of the platform in recent times. Another thing that this video would not be complete without is a mention of Ice Poseidon, who got banned in one of the most bizarre ways ever. So he's a creator that a lot of you might have heard of before, but you might not know the reason that he was terminated from Twitch's servers. And the answer to that story can be found if we flash back to the year 2017 for a moment. So Ice Poseidon rose to prominence on Twitch initially back in 2015, being banned a few times over the next few years for a few days at a time, nothing serious. He was most known for his IRL streams. But Judgment Day came in 2017 though, because he did perhaps one of the dumbest things a streamer of his caliber could do. If a commentary YouTuber wanted to make a video on the matter, they'd surely make reference to the fact that April 28, 2017 was the day that Ice Poseidon's Twitch career died. Because it was the day that he was traveling on American Airlines Flight 458 in Phoenix, Arizona, where he decided to livestream his entire airport experience. And I mean everything. What gate he was at, what flight he was on, and people found out what time it was leaving, and he got swatted. I'm not going to say that this man deserved it, he is clearly the victim, nobody deserves to be swatted, but I am going to say that there were very simple ways to prevent this from happening. Still, Twitch did not like this turn of events one bit, and they branded him too dangerous because the dude literally got a plane with many passengers on it swatted. They gave him a ban to the roar of disapproval from fellow streamers. But years on, they've kept their foot down, and he's had to look to other streaming sites such as the late Mixer, rest in peace, and currently YouTube to keep his streaming career alive. Luckily for him, this was the one and only time he got plane swatted. So this next streamer that I'm going to talk about comes from a very famous story that I'm quite sure you would have heard, but you might not have heard this part to it. And for me to explain this, we're going to have to go back to the early days of TikTok. To be more specific, the days of the "why do good girls like bad guys" meme, where some neek would pretend to be a nerd and, just like the Don't Judge Me challenge a few years before, act like a complete loser, cover the camera, and oh wow, they're a hot guy, I can't believe that. Within that trend came this guy here, the Bidet, who is, in my opinion, TikTok's first celebrity. This dude is the Fred of TikTok. He walked so Charli D'Amelio could run. I'm gonna delve more into the story of the Bidet in a future installment of the Book of the Banned series about banned TikTok accounts. But all you need to know is that it's alleged that the slightest amount of TikTok fame got to his head and he began DMing underage fans, causing his account to be struck. Now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with Twitch? And I'll tell you. A short while after these events, someone noticed this new account named Freak Alpha, which, to the shock and surprise of everyone, was Buddy Haynes, otherwise known as the Bidet. People began to look up this new username online, and guess what they found? The Bidet was a Twitch streamer under this new username. Not for long though, because once Twitch found out, his account was banned, as the Bidet has been essentially blacklisted from all social media. Again, I will speak about him a little bit more in depth in a future video, but just know for now he actually had a banned Twitch account. And now for the story of Narcissa Wright, whose tale might be the most extreme reason why someone on this video got banned. If you've never heard of her before, she's actually quite infamous online, and her story is a lot longer than I'll be able to squeeze into this video. I'd recommend checking out Cecil McFly's 3-hour video on the topic if you want a longer explanation. But if you want a nicely condensed version, Narcissa was one of the internet's most popular early streamers, being best known for speedrunning Legend of Zelda games, in total earning more than 30 million views and at a point in time frequently streaming in front of thousands. Her tale though would soon turn into tragedy, as eventually she would close her own Twitch account down due to negative comments that she was receiving. This was in 2016, but she would soon open it back up on her own accord. What was out of her control though was the face of her account in 2018 after she accidentally violated Twitch's policy on nudity and sexual content. Apparently her account was banned indefinitely, but she would return to Twitch in March of 2022 when something shocking would happen. She opened up graphic content from a viewer on her stream, causing Twitch to once again suspend her account. This is when Narcissa went off the deep end and tweeted, "I want to kill myself and shoot the people at Twitch HQ." This was met with a permaban from Twitch before shortly being reduced to a 22-day suspension, and then Twitch went back on her suspension, re-permabanning her, with Narcissa having to move over to YouTube ever since. Her reputation was tarnished before these events, but it's even more so now. Instagram. It's a fan favourite social media platform and one of the most used all around the world. Best known for its photo sharing, many people turn to it each year to try and become an influencer. But if you are sharing pictures on the platform, you need to be warned that Instagram has been known to kill creators' accounts from time to time. And so in this video, we're doing a deep dive into some of the most interesting and infamous stories of creators who have been banned off the app. I think I should let you guys know that I have my own Instagram for only the most thirsty of pictures. You guys should follow me there, as well as my other socials, all linked in the description. With that said, let's get into things. So for the first entry in this brand new episode of the Book of the Banned, we have none other than Andy Tate. Let's address the elephant in the room. He's probably the most famous social media banning ever, and I've never discussed him on the channel before, so let's do it now. If you've somehow been living under a rock over the past 6 or so months and don't know who this guy is, this British-American kickboxer has been the talk of the town online this year, primarily because of his controversial views on gender and masculinity. While his social media presence has only really exploded recently, his controversial take can be traced back 4 years. For example, in 2017 he tweeted that depression wasn't real, and in 2016 he came under fire for allegedly racist and homophobic comments made on Twitter. More recently though, his attention has been set towards the battle of the sexes, with many critics of Tate believing that he is a sexist. As the weeks and months went by, he grew larger and larger and essentially became a cult figure online, with especially young, impressionable men taking to him for advice and guidance. Now, the struggles of young men today trying to find an identity is a conversation for another day, and a very interesting one at that, but nonetheless, a lot of them rallied right behind Andy Tate. They rallied behind him spouting about becoming an alpha male at any cost, as viewing women as masculine imperative, that they're meant to be controlled, dominated, and sometimes used in order to create more wealth. It was a lot, and some of his genuine quotes are really shocking to see in an era where PC content is more and more mainstream. Many people gravitated towards his unapologetic tell-it-as-it-is style of doing things, something that we've seen a lot over the past few years in modern Western culture wars. Now, it has to be said that his followers were in the minority. Most people saw Andy Tate as just another guy out there on the internet who's gonna say the next big, shocking thing to grow larger and larger in the minds of the masses. But essentially all social media sites shut him down, Instagram included. They said they found him too dangerous, his opinions might cause harm. And this is really one of a kind. Many people even claim that he militarized his followers. And in response to this, Tate actually claimed that he was playing a comedic character, that what he was saying wasn't meant to be taken seriously, allegedly donating over $1 million to women's charities in an attempt to get replatformed. but a few weeks down the road from his terminations, and Tate remains to be taken down. So with that hot potato out of the way, we can finally get on to maybe a few stories that you might not have heard of. And Instagram bans people generally for one of two reasons. There's more, but it's generally one of the two, and that's either sex and nudity or political extremist. This next story is one of the former, and it's one of the wildest things I have ever heard. Making any of these videos, this is one of the wildest stories, definitely up there. So this is an Instagrammer known online as Kitty Lixo. If you've never heard of her before, she is an adult model, podcast host, and an OnlyFans creator. And she was actually quite popular on Instagram at a point in time, having over 150,000 followers on her account. However, as you might already be aware, Instagram has various rules set in place for what you can and cannot show. One of the most frequently broken rules, as I said earlier, or at least the ones that people try and break the most often, is its policy on nudity. You can therefore assume that being an OnlyFans creator can sometimes be somewhat difficult, because often your content will be taken down and your account will be suspended. This happened to Lixo multiple times, but she was able to get her account back every time, to the delight of her fans. What you might not know though is the method that Kitty Lixo employed to get her account back, because according to her, she actually did it every time. So pause the video right now and maybe hazard a little guess. How do you think Kitty Lixo said that she got her account back every time? Because the answer might shock you. So she revealed on various podcasts that she was on that after her account was banned for the first time, she contacted a Meta employee, someone that she apparently knew already, and slept with him in order to get her account back. Now, she did state that this was not a quid pro quo kind of deal where it was expressly said that he would unban her if she slept with him. She actually said that she was the one to socially engineer the situation, and I guess everyone won, right? For now, because her account would soon be rebanned and rebanned again. And in the end, she didn't just sleep with one Meta employee, not even two, she slept with 3 different members of Meta to get her account unbanned several different times. And if I'm not mistaken, her account has yet again been suspended, so somewhere out there, a lucky Instagram employee is about to get his jollies. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I respect the hustle. She did that 3 times to get her account back. Fair play to her. So if you thought that story was crazy, this next one is also going to be crazy. We're still on the topic of sex and nudity and stuff, but this story goes way different. It's way out of left field, and so we're shifting things over to a Mr. Rob Kardashian, the now 35-year-old, who's best known for being on Keeping Up with the Kardashians and coming runner-up in season 13 of ABC's Dancing with the Stars. He's often referred to as the Forgotten Kardashian, on account that when compared to his older sisters, Kourtney, Kim and Khloe, he is less remembered. If you were to remember him though, it might be because of his actions on Instagram in July of 2017, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. To understand the events of July 2017, we have to go back a little bit further to January of 2016, because this is when Rob Kardashian met Angela Renee White, otherwise known as Blac Chyna. It took just 3 months for these two to get engaged, which is usually a bad thing, but in this case was also still a bad thing, because by the end of the year the couple had split, with Rob posting on his Instagram that they were no longer a couple. Though the reason they took such a short time to marry might be down to the fact they actually had a daughter together. Dream Kardashian was born in November 2016, conveniently just under 9 months after the two engaged. But as I said, the two would break up shortly after, but this breakup would only last a few days before they reconciled and decided to try it again. They've since said that their breakup was in the heat of the moment, and the two would live together happily ever after, for 2 months before they broke up again. So this takes us to February 2017, and this is finally when their story takes a break after an action-packed year. 6 months go by, absolutely nothing. It was then the heralded July 2017, and out of absolutely nowhere, this was a shock to all of the public, Rob Kardashian posts revenge porn of the mother of his child. Yes, this actually happened. Yes, it was very illegal. His defense was that she cheated on him, which might have happened. Tell you what a fact is though, this dude broke the law and posted nude pictures of the mother of his child, and he was permanently banned because of it. For now, because actually if you go and you look up Robert Kardashian on Instagram, you will see that he does have an account, but it's actually not run by him. It's instead run by Jenner Communications because he is no longer allowed to actually have an account, which is honestly hilarious to me. I find it really funny that he has an account, but he is legally not allowed to touch it. Still on the topic of sex and nudity, we have yet another story here, and this one's completely different from all the rest of them, and I want us to start thinking critically about it because there's definitely a conversation to be had here, and it caused outrage from various news articles for a very specific reason. So the person we're going to be talking about is Grace Coddington, a now 81-year-old former model and former creative director at Vogue magazine. So what was her heinous crime that got her banned? Well, she posted an image of a naked woman that she drew as a promotion for an auction including her favourite nude photographs. I am going to blur it just in case YouTube wants to ban me too, but if you want to see it for research purposes, it is out there on the internet. Now, you might see this near stick figure, this rough drawing, as not really overtly sexual. It's just a naked woman. There is no sex appeal in that, unless you're fucking weird. It's just art. There's really not much to get off to, unless you're desperate. But Instagram remained solid with their no nudity clause and banned her temporarily. As I said, there was an outcry by a lot of people saying that Instagram got this one wrong, and so they reviewed it and they agreed that they made a mistake on this. A spokesperson stated, "When our team processes reports from other members of the Instagram community, we occasionally make a mistake. In this case, we wrongfully removed content and we worked to rectify the error as soon as we were notified. We apologise for any inconvenience." Fair play, but this is where I want you guys to think about this critically. This was a piece of art. Was it only unbanned because it wasn't very detailed? What if it wasn't a non-distinct drawing? What if it was perhaps coloured in? What if the pen lines were hardened, etc.? Would it have been unbanned? Additionally, the person in this picture is meant to be her, I assume. What if she drew someone else? Would that have changed anything? Is the unbanned simply because this image isn't inherently sexual? How much does context have to play in these kind of things? That's a question that I want to pose to you guys because as with all art on social media, when it comes to their policies and stuff, a line does have to be drawn somewhere. And not to say I don't think Instagram were correct to unban her, I just wonder where they deem that line to be. And so to end things on the sex and nudity portion of this video, I want to talk about the most recent of all of these bannings. This one literally happened 2 or 3 days ago as of recording this video. I'm only going to talk about it briefly because it is the most obvious of all of these, but as of a couple of days ago, The Hub was banned off of Instagram. Instagram seems like it's really starting to ramp up with its high-profile suspensions and deletions. As I said, this really shouldn't come as a shock. I'm actually quite surprised they had an account in the first place. What were they posting? There's probably not a lot that they could have uploaded, but nonetheless, at one point, The Hub did have an account on Instagram, and as of a couple of days ago, they no longer do. At the start of this, I said that people generally get banned for one of 2 reasons, the first one being sex and nudity, and the second being political extremism. So let's talk about the latter. So it's a classic story that I've spoken a good few times now in these videos. Political extremism has been deemed unacceptable on Instagram by the higher-ups, and Gavin McInnes is the next example of someone who used their account on Instagram as well as Facebook to spread messages of hate and violence, and was therefore banned because of it. If you don't know him by name, you might know him by role because he's actually the leader of the Proud Boys, a group that's described on Wikipedia as, and I quote, "an American far-right, neo-fascist and exclusively male organisation that promotes and engages in political violence in the United States. The Proud Boys has been designated as a terrorist group in Canada and New Zealand." Those are not my words, those are Wikipedia's. So it shouldn't really be too much of a surprise that the leader of this group would have some pretty controversial opinions and would very likely promote violence on his social media sites, especially since, again, they engage in political violence as said on Wikipedia. The Ground designated that this man was too dangerous to stay up, and so they struck his account down. Now, the Proud Boys are generally associated with the absolute furthest ideas that the right could come up with. They're not generally reflective of your average right-wing voter, but the next few people might be a little bit more so, even if they are still pushing on the extremes. I'm going to label this one controversial right-wing pundits because these banned people were some of the more controversial right-wing political influencers. We have names such as Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, Paul Nehlen, Laura Loomer and Louis Farrakhan. These guys all fall under this category as they were each given bans from the service according to The Atlantic. And I want to play a bit of devil's advocate here and ask, was this a good thing? Let me preface this by saying that out of the ones that I've heard of, I don't generally agree with them on practically any issue. As I said, some of them I really don't know too much, but when it comes to your Yiannopoulos, your Joneses and your Watsons, I am familiar with them. But when I was at university, the final essay I wrote was on algorithmic radicalization, specifically in the build-up to the 2021 Capitol attacks. And one of the things that I found from analysing several different articles explaining how they were planned was that many of the radicalized individuals that stormed the Capitol isolated themselves from the rest of mainstream media. They filled up their own social media platforms with like-minded individuals, and I wonder that if these people weren't deplatformed like they were, would the hive minds of far-right social media apps have been effective as they were? By taking these people off Instagram, they're only going to pop up somewhere else and likely take a large portion of their audience with them. Would it not have been better to keep them where you can see them? Limit the posts that cross the line, obviously, and then keep an eye on them instead of take them down. Because these people aren't just going to die down, they're just going to move. Again, that is me just playing devil's advocate, but I do understand that Instagram for a while was housing some dangerous political extremism, or at least according to several Atlantic articles that I read during research. But nonetheless, these guys' messages reaching their fans is inevitable. But I also do understand that if you keep these people on Instagram, their content is going to be more available for the masses. So I can definitely understand why they did it, and to be honest, I think they were right in doing so. But again, I want to play a bit of devil's advocate and get a bit of a dialogue flowing, maybe a little bit of a debate. Let me know what you guys have to say. So our next story is strange, but it also could be quite socially important despite not being very well known about, and that's Indigenous beaders. So it's slightly weird to say that of all content types on Instagram, for some reason many people that upload Indigenous bead content have claimed that they've been deplatformed on the gram, which has led a lot of them to suspect Instagram of racial biases because, let's be fair, there's absolutely no reason that beaders should be suspended on Instagram. Now, according to a Vice article I read, over 20 different Indigenous beader creators banded together back in January 2021. Initially believing that it was against Instagram's terms of service to sell on there, but as it turns out, they were totally within their rights to do that. It was then thought that these people were the victims of racial targeting, with racists going out of their way to report their accounts, especially because beadwork is apparently very important to Native American culture. This was reported all over the news, and so Instagram did eventually look into things, even if it did take a while to happen. Though, based on the fact that articles soon dried up on the topic, it's unknown if these cries for help fell on deaf ears for a second time, or if Instagram eventually did face the music. Speaking of racism, this next chapter in the book of the band is going to be designated to the UK rapper Wiley, who was terminated in 2020 after an anti-Semitic tirade on the gram. So Wiley is best known for his music, often being referred to as the godfather of grime. He currently has 1.7 million monthly streams on Spotify, but you will not find him on Instagram anymore, simply because he isn't allowed on there. According to this BBC article that reported on the incident, he name-dropped several Jewish celebrities such as Lord Alan Sugar, comedian David Baddiel, and BBC presenter Emma Barnett in this anti-Semitic attack. It wasn't just on Instagram though. He also spread his anti-Jew hate message on Facebook and Twitter. And here are just a few things that he's quoted as saying or typing. Jewish people are cowards. Do something to me. I'm waiting. Jewish people act tough, but they hide behind the police. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to tell you everything that he said about Jews because he hates them. He also accused them of owning the banks, owning the police, and secretly running the country. I mean, looking at some of this guy's tweets, his heart is either poisoned by hate, or he has a few screws loose, or even both. That's not the important thing though. The important thing was that Instagram saw this and decided to put an end to it by disallowing him from ever posting there again. So this is going to sound a bit weird, but in this part of the video, we need to do a history lesson of the 20th century to learn about the Kennedy family. So obviously John F. Kennedy was the most famous of all of the Kennedys. He was the 35th president until he was assassinated in one of the most shocking moments in American history. It's common general knowledge that his older brother Joseph Kennedy was primed to be the politician of the family, but was killed in World War II. His younger brother Robert Kennedy, on the other hand, would be the US Senator of New York until his assassination in 1968. Robert Kennedy would leave behind 11 children, some more important than others, but most of them are still alive today. Robert Jr. though is of particular importance to us in this video because it's him, John F. Kennedy's nephew, who has been given a permanent ban from Instagram. And the reason for this is that he is a fervent anti-vaxxer. The first signs of him being an anti-vaxxer, at least to the public, date all the way back to 2005, when he declared his unwavering support for the scientifically debunked notion that vaccines cause autism. And since then, he's become a strong anti-vaccine advocate, sharing anti-vax rhetoric all over his Instagram during the pandemic especially. And this has been deemed as spreading false information by Meta. Apparently spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories violate Instagram's policies, so Robert Jr. was given the boot. This news story would resurface in just the last month though, as a charity that Rob Jr. founded, Children's Health Defense, was also given a ban, with Instagram thinking that it was based on lies, cherry-picking arguments that fitted within its narrative. And so Rob Jr., nephew to one of the most famous world leaders of all time, will never be allowed back on one of the most famous social media platforms of all time. So this next story is perhaps the most different and distinct reason that any of these people have been given a ban from Instagram. And it comes from Hamza Ahmed, who you might know as yet another YouTuber online whose work revolves around self-help, self-improvement, and becoming a strong man. Once again, his kind of content is primarily targeted towards young men who lack purpose and direction. But since these guys have been getting a lot of hate recently, I want to go a bit against the grain and put out some support for some of them, because they're not all Andy Tates. And the difference between the two of them, Hamza Ahmed and Andrew Tate, is that Andrew Tate's content seems to more be about externally pushing women down. Whereas, at least from the videos that I've seen of Hamza Ahmed, I don't watch him all the time, but at least from the videos that I've seen of him, his content seems to be more about pushing men up, about self-improvement, about becoming a better man. For this reason, he told his fans in a video that's since raked in over 300,000 views that they should delete Instagram, citing that it's not normal or healthy to have it because comparing yourself to Photoshop models spending daddy's money to go on holiday isn't good for your mental health. Something else not good is the fact that its algorithm is incredibly good at its job, and so you might be on it for an hour without even knowing, and you probably wouldn't have learnt anything new, you would have just wasted your time. And even if you have all the willpower in the world like this dude Hamza Ahmed, even if you know that it's a waste of time, you still will probably get caught up in it. So he sent out this message, and I skimmed over the video. It's about 42 minutes, but I got the gist. Nothing horribly misogynistic, nothing threatening violence, nothing sexual. And in the end, Instagram decided to do his job for him, and they actually banned him. Literally for speaking out against the platform, to my understanding. He made a video in response, and yeah, to his knowledge, he was banned for literally saying you should not go on Instagram. It's absolutely not grounds for termination, at least not in my opinion. Still, it happened, and I can't find his account on Instagram, so I assume that he's still gone, which is very controversial. I'd actually like to hear from Instagram to find out why. Maybe I've misinterpreted things here, but at least from what I've seen, I find this to be quite unfair. And I understand these social media apps, they are privately owned, they can have whoever they do or don't want on there. But as years have gone by, bannings are starting to get more and more commonplace, and I wonder if there will ever be a time where you can just get banned off of Instagram because you say something bad about it. Or you get banned off YouTube because you say something bad about YouTube. Maybe that's just me wearing a tinfoil hat, but I'm very confident that the argument about free speech online is only going to get more prominent as the years go by. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that Twitter is just a cesspit of terrible takes, deluded idiots, and Minecraft stans. So thank you very much for watching, that's it from me. Okay, that's not related to anything in this video, but I think I can speak for everyone when I say it. In this video, I'll tell you several of the most fascinating, disturbing, and unique stories of why several Twitter users were given bans from perhaps the worst social media app of all time. And if you like this video or any of my other ones, be sure to follow me on all of my socials, links are in the description. Aside from that, let's get into things. So let's get one out of the way that you might be very aware of because its repercussions are happening as we speak. This is the story of why Jordan Peterson got banned off Twitter. So the origin of this story, I guess, can go all the way back to Elliot Page, formerly known as Ellen Page, the high-profile actor who publicly came out as transgender in December 2020. Since then, he's come under criticism from various right-leaning social media personalities, one of them being Jordan Peterson, who one day tweeted out, "Remember when pride was a sin? Ellen Page just got her breast removed by a criminal physician." And Twitter deemed this to be breaching its code of conduct, specifically its rule on hateful content, stating that Peterson's Twitter would remain suspended until he apologised, to which Peterson firmly replied he would never do such a thing. For this reason, Peterson is expected to be indefinitely suspended, which may have had adverse effects from what Twitter would have intended because Peterson has since joined Daily Wire Plus. It just so happens that he joined on the same day that he got indefinitely suspended. He's declared Twitter as an enemy and uploaded a video to his channel in which he said this.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
The video has performed immensely well for his channel, garnering over 3 million views and counting, and the entire drama was broadcast all over the news, with many taking Page's side, saying that Peterson had no right to say the things that he did, and what Page was doing did not affect him. Others, on the other hand, argued that Peterson was simply exercising his right to free speech. But nonetheless, this rift between Peterson and Twitter is the most recent major banning incident. But it won't be the last, neither in real life nor in this video, because I have yet another story to tell you guys. So our next story takes place going on a decade ago, so many of the people that are watching this video will not remember it in the slightest. But in February 2013, Twitter actually banned Burger King off the site, and it wasn't for the reason you would think. That reason clearly being that their burgers are shite. It wasn't that, it was actually a decent and logical reason. So the reason behind their banning was that Burger King had actually been hacked, and I guess the hacker thought themselves as a bit of a comedian because they changed their profile picture to the McDonald's logo, as well as their background to a photo of Fish McBites. Though not everything that the hacker did was perhaps as in jest as this, because the hacker started tweeting out racial slurs and various other slurs, as well as making reference to drugs. The account also tweeted that the company had been sold to rival chain McDonald's, going on to post the message, "If I find you at Wendy's, we fighting." McDonald's tweeted out in defense of Burger King, and the tweet stopped after about an hour or so. So the golden question is why? And if you're a European around my age or perhaps a little bit older, allow me to unlock a memory that you might not have thought about for years now, and it takes place in very early 2013. Because this was the year of the horse meat scandal. So if you haven't heard of this before, at the very start of 2013, numerous companies, notably Tesco, Iceland and Burger King, were found to be selling burgers made out of horse meat. They had been buying their beef from ABP Food Group, and long story short, traces of horse meat were found in their products. Sometimes these cuts of meat were upwards of 100% horse, so it's likely that the hacker was unhappy that they had unknowingly eaten a horse and decided to act a few weeks later. In the end though, Twitter was able to unban their account after resolving the issue and everything went back to normal. So I'll keep this next one brief because of its content, but I also want to make sure that I provide sufficient context so I don't get demonetized. But whilst we're on the topic of 2013, I might as well mention that that was the year that terrorist group Al-Qaeda decided to take to Twitter to spread their message. Yes, this is a thing that actually happened. It used the username @Shomokal-Islam, and let's just say it didn't last very long, because after just 5 days and 29 tweets, Twitter got a word that they were trying to use their platform to spread their evil message, and they were instantly kicked off. Perhaps the scariest part of all of this was that they were tweeting out in English, so they might have been trying to radicalize Westerners, or at the very least, English speakers. The account gained over 1,500 followers in 24 hours, including several high-profile digital jihadists, and so I hope when it was shut down, Twitter took note of who was following it. But nonetheless, because the ordeal was over as quickly as it started, it's been difficult to see any messages that they sent out. And it's probably for the best that I myself, or even you guys, don't. So let's just leave it at that and move on. And whilst we're on the topic of this kind of stuff, I'm going to have to talk about PewDiePie, and I'm going to have to talk about it very gingerly again because I don't want to get shafted by YouTube. But if you don't know this already, or if you forgot, you might be surprised to find out that in September of 2016, it was reported that PewDiePie was banned from Twitter. The reason? So he didn't like the entire rigmarole surrounding verification on Twitter, and so he unverified himself. Shortly after this, he tweeted that himself and Jacksepticeye had joined ISIS, which was why they were unverified. Septiceye replied that he had actually joined the Nazis, not ISIS, but let's just say that despite how obvious this was that it was a joke, some people genuinely believed it. Twitter, on the other hand, did not like it, not one bit, so they decided to temporarily ban PewDiePie. This is why, if you look him up on Twitter, you'll see that he does not actually have the glorious blue checkmark. You'll also see that he's given up on Twitter and only has a PewDiePie account so that no one else can take it. Regardless, this joke went viral, everyone lost their shit, and it was all explained in a Pewds video on the situation titled Why I Got Unverified, which has taken in over 13 million views. I mean, this entire sequence of events highlighted the stupidity of Twitter from start to finish, and I can understand why he gave up on his account. Nonetheless, let's move on to our next story. So this one is gonna sound really weird, but I promise you it's true. So Twitter was created by Jack Dorsey, Noah Glass, Biz Stone, and Evan Williams back in 2006. And for the longest time, the first of these men, Jack Dorsey, was the CEO. Until very recently, actually. But did you know that in November 2016, Jack Dorsey was actually banned from the site? I'm not making this up. This is actually true. In the run-up, as well as just after the 2016 elections, there was a wake of extremist content being uploaded to Twitter. And so Twitter wanted to do a crackdown on the accounts and content being uploaded. Something must have got mixed up though, because it actually suspended its very own CEO's account. If you looked him up, you would not be able to view anything that he had tweeted. Now, Twitter said that this was merely an internal error, but this would be like if Facebook banned the Zuck, or if YouTube got rid of Susan. A man could dream. Anyways, Dorsey tweeted out soon after that he was setting things back up after these events, but in the process, it said that he actually lost over 700,000 followers. And I don't think I need to be the one to point out the irony that this was all in an attempt to ban far-right conspiracy theorists whose positions on the platform were deemed untenable. I have no idea how Dorsey was lumped in with all of them, but in fairness, this was quite humorous upon reflection. So we're taking our next story out of BuzzFeed, because that's just what we do on this channel. We like to roll BuzzFeed style. And you already know that this is the kind of thing they love to report on. So this story centers around a 30-year-old Twitter user, serial mascot Tony the Tiger, and the subject of sexual harassment. Alex Boivin was the soon-to-be banned man, and he was banned in August 2017. It all stemmed from when the Tony the Tiger Twitter account posted this tweet. Sure, cinnamon frosted flakes look great! And that tiger on the box doesn't look half bad either. Hashtag blushing, hashtag cinemograph. That was my Tony the Tiger impression, alright? Leave me be. And Alex Boivin replied, I'd fuck that tiger, because why not? It's Twitter. Ban. Literally, that's all it took. This man declared his intention to have sexual intercourse with a cartoon serial mascot, and Twitter decided that this was too much. Someone please stop this madman! And maybe you're thinking that this guy deserves what's coming to him, but keep this in mind, and this is going to sound really weird, but sexually harassing Tony the Tiger on Twitter is actually very commonplace. Or at least it was. Tony the Tiger seemed to have a lot of thirsty fans out there, like Scary Kerry here, who tweeted in reply to the very same tweet, God, I hope that's milk, and this guy here tweeting, wow, do the same in my mouth, but not with milk please, you're so muscular. And this person here tweeting, God bless, I need more of Daddy Tiger in my life. Keep in mind, this comes after the Tony the Tiger account decided that it was necessary to mass block a bunch of furries in 2016 after they kept sexually harassing him. A year and a half on, and it was still happening. But the important thing here is, again, Boivin was definitely not the first to tweet anything about Tony the Tiger. I mean, yeah, his tweet might have been the most straightforward and lack any innuendo in the slightest, but this harassment of a fictional tiger was commonplace. So commonplace, in fact, that Tony the Tiger actually had his account closed down in 2018 because of all of those horny furries, which is a bit off topic for this video, but I still wanted to talk about it because it's a wild fucking story. I mean, I just don't know what got into people. I mean, I know Tony the Tiger's big, he's got a deep voice, he's muscular, he's got total dom energy. Actually, give me a minute. But either way, that is a weird story. So not only did Alex Boyven get banned, but Tony self-banned himself. Looks like furries are the apex predator of Twitter. In the same vein, we next have Luke Taylor, who is banned off Twitter for threatening to kill Mr. Peanut, which I really don't know how you do that, considering Mr. Peanut is indeed a fictional character. Nonetheless, I digress. Apparently, this guy for months upon months made it his mission to target the Mr. Peanut Twitter account and just harass him. It wasn't his first rodeo though, because weirdly enough, Mr. Peanut from time to time would interact back with him, which I find really strange. I mean, I really don't want to go on about it because it's essentially the same deal as the Tony the Tiger situation, but the dude kept harassing Mr. Peanut, who must have narked on him or something, because the next thing you know, Taylor was banned from Twitter and then decided to write a Vice article about it. He was getting a fair amount of support too, sometimes getting upwards of thousands of likes, nearing ratio territory. So you know it's serious. But eventually he got permanently banned because of it. And so the mighty Mr. Peanuts has vanquished yet another foe. Please don't go and harass him after this video though, because you might get your account suspended. And to finish our trifecta of fictional harassment-based bannings, our next story is yet again quite similar, and it concerns a person that you probably haven't heard of getting banned for yet another completely bizarre reason. The guy who was banned is named Will Sloan. What was this terrifying crime that Mr. Sloan did to get banned from Twitter? Well, he said that he wanted Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian to die. The context of this was that Esquire tweeted out that Baby Yoda was a purity in this dark, dark world, and he united everyone from all over the internet. Apparently not Sloan though, because he then said that he hopes that Baby Yoda dies painfully. Probably a joke, but even if it wasn't, we're talking about a puppet here, people. And unless Twitter were diehard stans for The Mandalorian, this was absolutely no grounds for a suspension. As I said, the likelihood is that it must have been some sort of bot that suspended the guy, but in an ideal world, this thing just wouldn't happen. In fairness, I guess that all social media platforms have their problems with their terms of service though, and it's not just exclusive to YouTube or Twitch. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Let's move on to the next story. As for our next story, on the 24th of January 2021, just 6 months out from the event taking place, the Tokyo Organization Committee of the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games was actually banned off Twitter for a very heinous crime indeed. So what could these guys have done? An organizing committee for the Olympics? What could they have done to warrant a ban from Twitter? For some reason, I don't know why, these guys decided to set their age on Twitter as 7. Again, I have no clue why. Maybe they had been planning it for 7 years or something, but regardless, on Twitter, you are not allowed to be 7 years old. And so, despite the fact that the people behind it were likely all adults, because they said they were 7, they were suspended from Twitter. You need to set your age as at least 13. The account had 350,000 followers at the time and over 450,000 now, and they had to get into contact with Twitter's support team to tell them that yes, in fact, the people in charge of this account are not 7 years old and are in fact all old enough to have a Twitter account. And then I moved houses and caught fresh as flu, so I'm sorry if the next part of this video looks and feels a bit different to the rest, but hopefully this will all be ironed out by the next upload. So despite how odd some of these Twitter bannings have been, I don't know if any of them beat this next story I'm about to tell you, and that's saying something. So the next user, at Nemois My Wife, was permanently banned after doing something just disgusting, sickening, vile. He made a horrific threat to an already dead mosquito. That's right, that's a thing that happened. This news story was picked up, nowhere big, only the BBC decided to report on it. So the sequence of events that happened here was that the Twitter user was just minding his own business, just watching TV, when a mosquito flew through the window and started biting him, and just kept biting him and biting him and biting him, and eventually he had enough, and he just killed the mosquito, taking a picture of it and uploading it to Twitter with the caption, "Where do you get off biting me all over while I'm trying to relax and watch TV? Die. Brackets. Actually, you're already dead." and for some wild reason, the Twitter powers that be decided that this was grounds for termination. They must have been mosquito stands or something, and this was all to the laughter and ridicule of literally everyone who watched these events transpire. The guy set up a new account at Daydream Matcha in order to criticize Twitter, and again, for some reason, the Twitter powers that be decided to flex their muscles that day and suspended the account. Legitimately, it seems like the dude has been permanently banned off Twitter, and all of his future accounts are going to be permanently banned for killing a mosquito and sharing it on Twitter. Which, of all of these videos that I've made, this is my 5th now. I must have covered about 100 banned social media accounts and communities. I think that this was the weakest reason why a person deserves a permanent ban. Some people theorize that he was just being banned by a bot initially, but having 2 separate accounts get the axe is very suspicious, and something that simply had to be included in this video. So we're taking a trip out west for our next story to discuss a man who has been dubbed Arizona's most unhinged Senate candidate. And let me tell you right now, that is a name befitting to this gentleman. Craig R. Brittain is our next banned user, and his story is filled to the brim with interesting tidbits. Where do I even start is the question. I guess maybe we could begin with his revenge porn website. So this guy many years ago started a revenge porn site, isanybodydown.com, where he would post nude pictures of women and proceed to extort them for hundreds of dollars. A few years later, after he made his buck in extortion, he decided that politics was the right career path for him, and he decided to enter Arizona's Senate race, where he was overshadowed by a racist who was also in the running. So that's a bit of background to his character, but the big event and the reason why he was included in this video was that in March 2018, he decided to make reference to the fact that he thought that the survivors of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting were being paid by gun control groups. Twitter found this conspiracy theory to be grounds for termination, and that would have been that if Craig over here didn't find this to be against the law, I guess. So he told Twitter to saddle up, because he was going to take them to court and sue them. The case was eventually thrown out of court for being frivolous. And as of recent, he's been posting on Facebook about how he's very glad that Elon Musk is going to buy Twitter because he hopes to get his account reinstated. So who knows, maybe one day we'll see this dude back on Twitter again. God, I hope not. So I've spoken about politics a little bit more in these videos than I ever generally like to do because they make my comment section an absolute nightmare. But I'm going to have to talk about it once again right here, and I hope that we can all band together to say that this was taken too far. Steve Bannon served as the White House's chief strategist during the first 7 months of the administration of former US President Donald Trump. That is what he might be best known for. Well, either that or the fact that in 2020, Bannon began a podcast called War Room, which would have been completely fine, whatever, if he didn't say some absolutely egregious things on there. He absolutely despised Dr. Fauci and FBI Director Christopher Wray, and on his podcast he said that he would like to behead the 2 of them and go on to graphically describe what he'd do with their detached heads, saying that he'd like to put them on pikes outside the White House and use them as warnings to bureaucrats who dared oppose Trump. What kind of Walking Dead shit did this guy just fantasize about? After those comments, he was basically blacklisted from all social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter included. I mean, what did he think was actually going to happen? Insane, stupid, irrelevant. And also breaking news, as of a few days ago, he surrendered himself to authorities and might even spend time in jail. After a 6-count indictment charged Bannon with money laundering, conspiracy, and scheming to defraud for his alleged role in We Build a Wall, a group that raised at least $15 million to construct a barrier along the border with Mexico, but skimmed the donations. And so even if he didn't get banned, he wouldn't have been able to use the social media very soon, because as we all know, there is no Twitter in the clink. So along the same lines now, we have The Federalist, which is a USA-based conservative website. They provide various news stories from a conservative perspective, which you will like if you lean that way or not like if you lean the other way. There wouldn't have been too much wrong with what they had to say until one day in March 2020, they did something that would get them temporarily banned to the dismay of their over 300,000 followers. As I said, this was in late March 2020 when people were most afraid of the coronavirus and what it could do. The Federalists, though, thought that COVID was nothing more than a bad flu and took the approach that if we all caught it soon, we would soon achieve herd immunity. And for that reason, they suggested that we all do a similar thing that we do with chickenpox and have pox parties for people with COVID. Which, for those of you who don't know, when a child develops chickenpox, a lot of the time parents will allow them to have a party and gather all of the kids in the neighbourhood so that they can all catch it together, and apparently this prevents shingles later in life, which is a bit more dangerous than chickenpox. Now, the problem with this was that while chickenpox, especially when you're young, is harmless, if you're going out there intentionally exposing yourself to COVID, especially its first strain, it could have been very dangerous. Well, Twitter thought this at least, so they enacted a temporary ban on the Federalist so that this message could no longer be spread. It was eventually lifted, and today the Federalist sits at 350,000 followers. Yet another high-profile Twitter banning, and one that actually led Twitter to being banned in a country, was the termination of the Nigerian president's account. This is actually true. Twitter was banned in Nigeria for about a year and a half between the 5th of June 2021 and the 13th of January 2022, all because they banned the account of the Nigerian president Muhammadu Buhari. So why did they do it? Well, Mr. Buhari was tweeting in reference to Nigeria's civil war, which occurred between 1967 and 1970. The tweet read, "Many of those misbehaving today are too young to be aware of the destruction and loss of lives that occurred during the Nigerian civil war. Those of us in the fields for 30 months who went through the war will treat them in the language they understand." And a Twitter spokesperson said this post was, "In violation of the Twitter rules, the account owner will be required to delete the violative tweet and spend 12 hours with their account in read-only mode." Many people were angry on social media over the tone of language used by the president, thinking that it was too forceful. And in reflection, this may have been the reasoning behind the ban. Now, to say that I know anything about the Nigerian civil war apart from the utmost basics would be lying. I have no clue about the socio-political state of Nigeria, past or present. But the fact that the world leader was banned from Twitter while still in office and decided that because he was banned, that nobody in his country could have Twitter is something that I thought was worth mentioning in this video. Okay, so I've done a few of these now. Someone has to have a bingo on banned social medias. But once again, we're opening the book back up to talk about the book. Facebook, that is. Because since its creation in 2004, the Zuck social media platform has been one of the most frequented areas of the internet. And as online spaces go, it's up there with having perhaps the most history, which is why we have plenty of stories today about its bannings. So without further ado, please make sure to follow me on all of my socials if you haven't already. And with that said, let's get into this. So one thing we have to get clear right off the bat is that Facebook, compared to most other major social media platforms, does not actually ban its users so much. So today we're going to mostly be talking about countries banning Facebook. This is a bit of a reversed Book of the Banned episode. But there are some very notable people who have been banned who we will get to later in the video. In the meantime though, this is a map of countries that do currently or have in the past banned Facebook, which as you can see, the more east you go, the more south it gets, with much of Asia having a ban on the platform. So first up, and perhaps most obviously, did you know that North Korea doesn't have Facebook? Yeah, that one was a real shocker. I bet you didn't know that one was true. Obviously, that was just a bit of sarcasm, but what I personally was shocked to find out was that it was only officially announced that it would be banned in April 2016, meaning that hypothetically, you could have been on it before then, even if I doubt that back in March of 2016, Koreans had complete free reign of Facebook. Still, it was only officially banned in April 2016 as a bid to try and control its citizens' access to information outside the country. And I personally think that of all major social media apps, Facebook perhaps has the biggest links to being an American staple that's gone global, kind of like how McDonald's is in a ton of countries, but it's obviously intrinsically an American food chain. Now, it wasn't just Facebook that was banned in North Korea back in 2016, a bunch of social media apps such as Twitter and YouTube were also banned, and apparently adult and sex websites too, in what was one of the biggest restrictions of online content ever seen by a nation. I mean, this could have been expected, right? It is North Korea at the end of the day. If you know anything about the country, you could probably make an educated guess that Facebook would be banned there. So let's move on to a story that you might not know so much about. So we're going to switch things over to Turkey now for our next story, and this one is perhaps the darkest one we have today. And we have to take things back to 2015 because that's when it took place. It involves a man of the name Mehmet Selim Kiraz, who is a chief public prosecutor. He was extremely experienced in his field, having been appointed to the Istanbul Chief Prosecutor's Office of Officer Crimes a year prior. But on the 31st of March 2015, tragedy would strike when the then 46-year-old was taken hostage by members of the Revolutionary People's Liberation Front, an extreme Marxist party that was established back in the mid-90s. This group is considered a terrorist organisation within Turkey, the United States, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Japan, and the EU. According to The Independent, they took him hostage in an act of revenge over the death of a teenager during the anti-government protests in 2013 in which he was investigating. So anyways, these men took Kiraz hostage, and during the rescue operation, it said that gunshots were heard within the building that he was being held. The building was then stormed with the police shooting the attackers, but it would be too late as they had shot Kiraz in the head and he would later die in hospital. And you might be wondering why this would lead to Facebook being banned in Turkey, and it was actually because whilst Kiraz was being held, they took a picture of him with a gun to his head, which I will not be showing here. And about a week after his death, the photo leaked online. Turkey decided that in an attempt to put their foot down, they would have to temporarily block Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and more than 100 other websites for a few hours, saying that anti-government propaganda would not be tolerated. These sites were given back to the people after their point was proven, but it's also to my understanding that in recent years, they've gotten more strict with their citizens' internet use. There is an American non-profit called Free House, and they do an annual index dedicated to analysing each country's democracy and political freedom. And one of these lists that they do is on internet freedom, where they gave Turkey a 32 out of 100, which ranked it 149th out of 180 countries. So apparently blocking sites such as YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, as well as others, isn't entirely uncommon within Turkey. This next one is very important, and instead of it being a story about how Facebook is banned in a country, this is a story of how Facebook has banned a certain topic. Because Facebook has a very interesting history with the topic of Holocaust denial. To get to the very bottom of this, we need to go back to 1984. And no, not that 1984. I'm talking about the year that Mark Zuckerberg was born. And just in case you don't know, he was born into a Jewish household, with his great-grandparents, who were also Jews, immigrating to the United States from Central Europe. So you would assume that being raised a Jew, all forms of anti-Semitism would be harshly struck down from his platform, right? Well, until 2020, not exactly. Because in 2018, Zuckerberg came out to say that within reference to the Holocaust, Facebook would not remove any content that got it wrong. He went on to say that he didn't think that people were intentionally getting it wrong, perhaps he thought that this was merely down to ignorance than plain delusion. He definitely caught some heat from that, which I'm not surprised by, but I thought was interesting. 2 years later though, in 2020, he would change his mind and go back on that decision, agreeing with many of the people who had criticised his decision to not ban it back in 2018. The reason behind this was that it was deemed that there had been a recent rise in anti-Semitism globally, and false information was proving to be more and more of a concern for young people. For this reason, denial of that specific event was banned on Facebook. Obviously, I'm sure that this content was restricted in various Central and Western European countries anyway, because denial is illegal in such countries as Germany, Austria and France. But 2 years on from its banning, and you could make the case that this kind of viewpoint is more prevalent than we've seen in a long, long time. And for that reason, you might consider this the correct decision, because the second we drop the ball, the second that we get the facts wrong, the second that we get false information normalized, is the second that this kind of stuff could repeat itself. Either way, many Jewish people, charities, communities and organizations praise the move. It was stated by some Facebook higher-ups that eliminating this content wouldn't happen overnight, and it was reported a year later that a small amount of this content still ran rampant despite Facebook's attempts to try and suppress it. So a step in the right direction for sure, but we still have a trek to go. Much of this video has been about different countries' levels of online censorship, and we're going to follow that trend for our next story. So let's talk about why Facebook was banned in Iran. I don't know how much of a surprise it will be to you that Iran has Facebook banned, but when it comes to freedom on the internet, Iran has some of the most strict access in the world. A decade ago, over 1/4 of all internet sites were blocked by the country. And as of 2013, 50% of the top 500 viewed websites were all blocked. The Iranian government has forbidden its citizens using Facebook since the 2009 election, between two men whose names I'd probably horrendously butcher if I tried to pronounce them. But we have to try anyways. On Facebook, there was a growing support for the challenger Mousavi against the incumbent, the president. Mousavi's Facebook page had more than 6,000 likes and was only gaining momentum, so it was decided by the government that the plug would be pulled. Access would be restored a few days later, but on June 13th the election results would come in, and it was reported that Mousavi had only received 34% of the vote compared to the president's 62%. Mousavi's supporters went to the streets to protest what they thought was a fraudulent election, and to cut mass communication ties, Facebook was once again blacklisted. It will remain that way for over 4 years, when in September 2013, it was miraculously unbanned. Temporarily, that was, because it would once again be banned soon after, with many people thinking that this was merely a technical glitch. To this very day, it's to my belief that Facebook is still banned in the country of Iran. So this next one is perhaps the most different, the most unique of all of these stories I have today, and I'd be very surprised if you've heard it before. This is the story of Fouad Mortada. So we have to take things back to 2008 for this next tale, and head over to Morocco because that's where it takes place. If you're not aware, just like here in the jolly old United Kingdom, Morocco has a monarchy. To be more specific, they have a constitutional monarchy, so it's not an absolute monarchy like some countries. The monarch does not have complete power. However, being a monarchy, there's a certain level of status they still have to uphold, and this status would come into question when Fouad Mortada, an engineer, was found to have gone onto Facebook and create a profile of the Prince Roulé Rashid of Morocco, brother of King Mohammed VI. Eventually, the true identity behind this fake profile was found out, and let's just say when the authorities discovered this, they were quite displeased. Fouad was arrested on the grounds of villainous practices linked to the alleged theft of the prince's identity, and in February 2008 he was sentenced in Casablanca court to 3 years incarceration plus a fine of about 10,000 dirhams. But this wasn't before allegedly being horribly beaten and tortured at the hands of Moroccan police. But despite how horrendously he claims to have been treated, there is a happy ending to this story, which was that while he was behind bars, there was a large public outcry for his release. Moroccan blog sites went on strike, and more generally, the public gave their support to him, which led him eventually being released on the 18th of March 2008 after spending only 43 days behind bars. So yeah, a happy ending at the very least. Okay, this one goes without saying, but in case you don't know, Facebook is now banned in Russia, and it has been for a few months. I'm sure you can try and hazard a guess as to why. That's kind of stale news though at this point. I spoke about it very recently in my TikTok scandals video, because it was in the TikTok scandals video where I spoke about the splinternet occurring in Russia right now, with their citizens now being confined to their own online spaces, and with many of these online spaces being controlled by the government. What I'm more interested in though is the fact that there's been restrictions on what Russians are allowed to see for a few years now, and the specific incident related to Facebook that I think is worth looking at can be dated back to 2014. Because this was the year that Russia wanted to crack down on content related to Putin's former arch-nemesis, the one before Zelensky came along. Of course, that arch-rival being Alexei Navalny. You see, back in 2014, he was given a suspended sentence for embezzlement, but this was thought to have potentially been politically motivated as a way to prohibit him from running in any future elections. In the build-up to this trial came a tremendous amount of protesting by his supporters, who obviously weren't happy with the situation, and so they took to the streets, but also to social media to voice their concerns. Due to this, it was reported that Russian users of Facebook were banned from viewing a protest page that was in support for the popular dissident. And just in case you've never heard of Alexei Navalny, let it be known that he has been a giant thorn in the side of the government for many years now, so much to the fact that this Facebook page was liked by 10 million people. He is very, very popular. This wasn't a niche incident or anything. These protests had some severe steam behind them. But just like in my TikTok video, I need to ask, how worried should we be that our governments can take our rights to information online away? It's kind of a scary prospect. Free access to information should not be controlled by the government, should it? At least not in my opinion. I don't know though, I'm not pretending to be an expert in Russian politics in the slightest, I'm just putting that information out there and you guys can be the judge of it. And I know that this story is related to Facebook, but you might be wondering where was the banning, and I will justify it by saying this. In those days that Navalny was arrested and tortured, I'll go out on a limb and say that he was not allowed to use Facebook. He, like his supporters page, was most definitely banned. Boom, justified. Okay, let's do this next one really quick because I've spoken about it really recently in an episode of the Book of the Banned. I believe it was the Instagram one, so let's just talk very briefly about Andrew Tate and controversial right-wing pundits. So just like Britain First, after deciding the content they were spreading was hateful at the heart, Facebook decided to ban Andrew Tate as well as several other right-wing pundits. Those pundits include huge names such as Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, and Alex Jones. I spoke about these stories more in depth in my banned Instagram video, and since the Zuck owns both Facebook and Instagram, it only makes sense that these creators are banned on both platforms. But while Andrew Tate was more of a recent banning, these controversial right-wing pundits were all banned in May 2019 because Facebook decided that their ideologies were potentially harmful. Someone could potentially get targeted or hurt because of what they were spouting online. In the banned Instagram video, I questioned whether terminating their accounts would actually do anything or whether it would just force their supporters into unmonitored shadows and isolate them further from differing opinions. And I still question that. But if you're really interested in what I have to say about them in more detail, I'll put a video card up here, because I'm just kind of done with Western politics in this series. I spoke about it like 5 videos ago. I've said my piece on it. And now this story is perhaps the most interesting one I have today, which is why I wanted to save it. This is the story of Facebook's DIO list. So if you're unaware of this, which I'm sure the bulk of you are, Facebook has a list of people and organisations that it deems highly dangerous. It's called the Dangerous Individuals and Organisations List, or DIO list for short. They split the DIO list into 3 tiers, with tier 1 being absolutely the most problematic. These are people that have been deemed to be at risk of committing serious offline harm. I'm sure we can all imagine the types of people that might fit into that classification. Moving down, tier 2 is classified as violent non-state actors, which was a phrase I'd never come across before, so I decided to look it up on Google. And it seems as though these tend to be criminal organisations, with the biggest difference between tier 2 and tier 1, at least from what I've seen, is that tier 2 tends to focus more on the government, whereas tier 1 might be a danger to civilians. Tier 3 on the other hand is less severe compared to the previous 2, but it's still severe enough to have a ban be warranted. In general terms, this seems to be anyone who has severely violated the Facebook terms of service. Delving more into this topic, there is a news organisation based in the United States called The Intercept. I spoke about them a lot in my TikTok video, and these guys were actually able to intercept the DIO list, and their report on it was absolutely fascinating. They claim that terrorism made up about 70% of tier 1, mainly comprised of Middle Eastern and South Asian individuals and organisations, which it went on to claim that people of those ethnicities are overrepresented on the list. However, before you go out blaming the Zuck for this, it should also be mentioned that the intercept included a very interesting piece of information, which was that the Dio list in large part comes from the US government. In fact, over 1,000 entries on the list come directly from there. And it should also be said that of course not all people on the list are of Middle Eastern or South Asian origin. There are over 250 white supremacist groups and individuals on the Dio list in Tier 1. Though it should also be said that it has been claimed that many people from white supremacist groups are being treated a bit lightly and placed into Tier 3 when it could be argued that they deserve to be put higher. So there is a lot going on here, but basically every report that I've seen on it boils essentially everything down to race, but that's not the only way that you might be able to split apart and analyse these groups. All in all, if we're breaking things down, 53% of people on the list are linked to terrorism, 23% are militarized social movements, 17% are hate groups, and just under 5% are criminal groups, with 1% being comprised of violent non-state actors. Upon doing more research into the list, which I just find fascinating by the way, I stumbled upon a bit of information that rocked me to my core, which was that Facebook has a sort of algorithm in it, just like YouTube, that's job is to eliminate propaganda and false news and the sort as quickly as it can. And I found out that it took down 1.9 million pieces of ISIS and Al-Qaeda content, which is absolutely gargantuan and shocking, but what might be even more shocking was that this was in 2018 alone. And that might be even more shocking, but I'll top it because that was in the first quarter of 2018 alone. 1.9 million pieces of content eradicated in 3 months. That is wild. There is no other words to describe it. And of this content, 99% of it was detected by its algorithm or Facebook's human reviewers. So only 1% was reported by Facebook's users, which fair play. So yeah. Just to wrap things up on this story, many people, including Facebook's independent advisory board, have asked the platform to release the list for the sake of transparency. But I don't think they've officially released one yet, even if The Intercept, my knight in shining armour, did release something they've dubbed a reproduce list, which it said that it lightly edited for clarity. And it said that it released this list for the public to take a gander at and come to their own conclusions about. I don't know if I'm allowed to show this or anything. If my video gets demonetized, I guess it will be blurred, because I don't want to be known as a whistleblower by the US government or anything for drawing the eyes of tens of thousands of people on the internet towards it, but it's literally out there online, so I'm going to assume that it's good to go. YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and now Spotify. Over the past 6 months, I've made 6 videos now on various prominent banned users on social media platforms, and this one might be the most interesting. For you see, compared to the other platforms that I mentioned just a moment ago, Spotify doesn't exactly ban controversial or criminal artists as much as it distances itself from them. If you go and look up any controversial artist on Spotify, especially if they're popular enough, their music will likely still be up there, whether their crimes are just mere allegations or whether they literally confess to them in song form. But sometimes what they will do, if the artist has done something controversial enough or has faced legal repercussion for their actions, is try to disassociate themselves from them the best they can by removing these musicians from their official playlists. But there can be some small caveats to this where the artists are terminated for good. So in this video, I want to talk about some of the artists that were, at least for a time, or even might be right now, banned by Spotify. I'll tell you who they were, why they were, and if they or their music has been allowed back into the fold ever since. Things are about to get juicy, so let's get into it. Okay, first things first, let's tackle the elephant in the room, R. Kelly. We just have to talk about him. I want to say that all of you know who he is, but just in case for the 6 or 7 people at the back of the room that don't know, he was an extremely famous and successful singer. He sold 75 million records, won 3 Grammys, and was dubbed the King of R&B, despite apparently billing himself as the Pied Piper of R&B, which in fairness, is a pretty bang-on comparison if you know the reference. He definitely wasn't wrong about that. But even ever since the 90s, this dude has always been known to be a predator. In 2002, he was indicted on CP charges, though he walked away free 6 years later. He was later featured on the Boondocks in 2005 when they ripped into the guy, and he was the focal point of the 2019 documentary Surviving R. Kelly, which led his record label to terminate his contract. And to top it all off, in June 2022, he was given 30 years in prison for sexual abuse. His reputation is in absolute tatters, and to many, these allegations have overshadowed his music career, with a good portion of the public, especially those born after the 90s, knowing him more for the charges against him than his work. But what you might be surprised to hear about is that Spotify removed him from all of their official playlists back in 2018, before the release of Surviving R. Kelly. And obviously I don't need to explain why he was shadow banned, I just listed all of his crimes. But of course there was a catalyst, a trigger, and that was the rise of the Me Too as well as the Mute R. Kelly movements. The latter of which was founded by Kenneth Barnes and Orenike Odeleye in July 2017. The campaign, it has to be said, should be considered successful in its aims, as R. Kelly's music would soon fade from our radios. And since then, his music has remained off Spotify's official playlists. Once again though, let me reiterate that most people I'm going to be speaking about today, R. Kelly included, are still in fact on Spotify, but they are no longer pushed by Spotify themselves. Most of these artists are also put back onto Spotify's official playlists after the heat cools down, but R. Kelly is not one of these people. He's remained off their playlists from the time they introduced their hate content and hateful conduct policy up until now. Now, this is the first time that I mentioned the hate content and hateful conduct policy, but I actually have to step in here and pause the video. Because when I recorded this, I actually forgot to mention what this hate content and hateful conduct policy was, and it's quite an important thing to mention for these first 3 stories especially. You guys probably know by now that almost every modern social media platform have policies put in place that allow them to ban users who don't follow them. These policies usually fall under the categories of hate speech, inciting violence, harassment, extremism, and promoting self-harm or dangerous lifestyles, just to name a few of the most common. And as I'll explain later, Spotify tried to bring in their own conduct policy in May 2018, but it was relatively short-lived. The policy was focused on 2 points. The first being that creators embroiled in serious controversy were disassociated with the Spotify brand. The second was that content that was considered to include hate speech would be removed. Though according to Spotify, this second point has carried on since the policy was repealed, as we'll discuss later on in the video. But it was because this policy was so quickly gone back on that Spotify doesn't openly ban artists. I think that's all I wanted to say, so with that said, let's rewind to where we were and carry on. He's remained off their playlists from the time they introduced their hate content and hateful conduct policy up until now. But the same can't be said for XXXTentacion, however. As he was banned at the exact same time as R. Kelly, right as the hate content and hateful conduct policy was introduced in May 2018. Now, if you're a fan of X, you might know that he was shot and killed on the 18th of June 2018, only a month after his music was algorithmically suppressed by Spotify. However, the accusations levied against him prior to his death were very serious. He was awaiting trial for a plethora of charges against him, including aggravated battery of a pregnant victim, domestic battery, false imprisonment, and witness tampering. The events leading to these charges can be dated back to 2016, when he was charged by the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office. It was alleged that when he was 18, he had battered his girlfriend because he believed that she had cheated on him. The rapper would plead not guilty and maintained his innocence for the rest of his life. But in October 2018, months after his death, Pitchfork released some secretly recorded audio in which X supposedly admitted to what he did. As I said, this recording was released after the rapper's death, and so Pitchfork received backlash for this. But nonetheless, these accusations are thought to be the reason that he was removed from Spotify's official playlists while he was still alive. What might be a bit of a shock though, is that though Spotify launched their hateful conduct policy in early May 2018, by literally June 1st, less than a month after it was launched, it was scrapped, because Spotify thought that the language that it used in its announcement was too vague and too open to interpretation. So before he passed, X's music was in fact back on Spotify's official playlist. But even this caused a bit of controversy, because some people thought that they had added him back on right after his death, trying to capitalise on the situation, even if this wasn't the case. He had already been back on Spotify's official playlists for a few weeks prior to his passing. But while X's music was certainly, at least for a time, censored by Spotify, the case of Tay-K might have been slightly different, because X's and R. Kelly's shadow bannings were more spoken about, but Tay-K's on the other hand was much more quiet. In fact, the main reason why news articles picked up on it was because Tay-K tweeted out about it. If he didn't, the entire situation may have happened in silence. Now, I'm not too sure what kind of music my audience listens to. If you want to tell me, please do let me know in the comments. I would love to read what you guys have to say. So just in case you guys don't know him, Tay-K is a now 22-year-old Texas-based rapper. Back in May 2018, when the hateful conduct policy changes were temporarily announced, he was 18, but was already in trouble with the law. At the time, he was awaiting trial for murder and robbery charges allegedly related to a 2016 incident. Now, sources vary on specific details, but the most common story that I've heard is that Tay-K, real name Tamor McIntyre, conspired with then 19-year-old Megan Holt and 20-year-old Ariana Barrett to rob a 19-year-old named Zachary Bellowait. The plan was that the girls were going to seduce the young man and then go back to his place, where they would leave the door unlocked, letting people into the house to rob it. However, when this came to happen, Bellowait was in the house at the time with his friend Ethan Walker. Tay-K, the apparent orchestrator, had recruited gunmen Lotharian Merritt and Sean Robinson, as well as others, to enact this drug and money theft. But things went horribly wrong after these hired men shot both Zachary and Ethan. Zachary was allegedly hit in the head with brass knuckles and shot in the shoulder, but would survive. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky and was shot whilst his hands were in the air, his girlfriend testified. This, unfortunately, would prove fatal for Ethan. Tay-K was only 16 at the time of this shooting, but once the news broke, disturbingly, it massively helped his rap career. He was placed under house arrest, but in March 2017, he removed his ankle monitor and tweeted, "F this house arrest shit, they gonna have to catch me." He fled from Texas to New Jersey, but in June 2017 was recaptured and accused of beating and robbing a 65-year-old man and murdering a 23-year-old while on the run. He also made a music video for his song The Race in this time, and this leads us to 2018 when he was removed from Spotify's public playlists for a short time. But after the death of the hateful conduct policy a few weeks later, he's since been accepted back into the fold. But it probably doesn't matter too much anyway, because in July 2019, he was found guilty of murder for his part in the 2016 robbery. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison and is still awaiting trial for the charge against the 23-year-old victim he's said to have murdered whilst out on the run. So it's unlikely that the rapper will ever see the outside world again. But someone who almost never saw his music back on Spotify was Mr. Julian Alvarez, whose entire back catalogue was fully banned from the platform for 5 years. Julian Alvarez, the now 39-year-old from Mexico, was given a ban from Spotify back in 2017 after what's been described as a shocking drug-related scandal. This distressing news story broke after it was discovered that he had links to Mexican drug kingpin Raul Flores Hernandez. However, the harsh penalty of being banned from the platform for 5 years might have not been down to Spotify's discretion. Alvarez denied all of the allegations, but nonetheless, the Office of Foreign Assets Control stepped in to take him off of the platform. Alvarez claims that the reason that he's linked to the kingpin was that back in 2013, he associated himself with a construction company that he didn't realise at the time had links with Hernandez. Since these allegations came out, Julian Alvarez has not toured in the USA, but he is back on Spotify now. Not only that, but he's featured in a ton of Spotify created playlists, so he's back in the good books, perhaps to stay now after his 5-year absence. And while we're talking about 2017, just over 5 years ago as of writing this video, the band Power Bottom were temporarily not only just banned from Spotify, but also all other big music streaming services. We're talking the likes of Apple Music, Tidal, Google Play and Amazon. But the reason for this, however, wasn't down to these services themselves. Instead, it actually comes from their label Polyvinyl, who represent such well-known bands as Japandroids, Stagnant Pools, and Someone Still Loves You Boris Yeltsin. But while I joke, what Ben Hopkins, one member of the duo that made up Power Bottom, was alleged to have done is no laughing matter. The pair that made up the Brooklyn-based punk band both identified as non-binary and created music that celebrated their identities. They had just dropped their second album, titled Pageant, days before, when on Facebook, inside a private group called DIY Chicago, came a message posted by Kitty Cadero Collin, who came out and accused Hopkins of sexual abuse. Kitty claims that they didn't understand when someone said no to their advances, or at the very least, they wouldn't care. She told people inside this Facebook group to boycott the band because of this. And this came as a huge shock to the fan base, because often during live shows, Hopkins would grab the mic and promote being respectful to people in romance and relationships, pushing ideals that he himself is alleged to have violated. Hopkins was also alleged to be anti-Semitic, but the abuse story was just so large that it overshadowed that second allegation. Touring partners, as well as associated acts, distanced themselves from Power Bottom, and soon they were dropped by their label, who refused to carry on selling their records or merchandise, also later taking them off Spotify. Their back catalogue was returned shortly after, but their album Pageant had to follow later as it was the subject of legal issues. Hopkins has continually denied these allegations, but their reputation has been utterly destroyed by them nonetheless. So far in this video, essentially every artist I've spoken about has been relatively well known, and so for this next story I want to delve into the unknown and talk about a more niche band. This is the story of Smokey and the Mirror, who in 2015 claimed they were removed off Spotify for having too loyal of a fan base. The story goes that they released an album back in 2015 called Thin Black Line. They then rallied their fans to go listen to it, which they would have done, but Spotify claims that perhaps the album wasn't as popular as it might have appeared, because they thought that Smokey and the Mirror were using bots to boost their numbers. As this is prohibited, Spotify decided to ban them, and the Arkansas-based husband-wife duo took to the internet to try and tell their side of the story. Today, we were notified by our distributor, CD Baby, that Spotify removed our album because they analysed the listening data on our album and felt it was excessive, and that the listening was coming from a small group of listeners, and all the listeners were predominantly listening to our album more than other content on Spotify. They appealed to Spotify, who was having none of it. A Spotify community moderator made the point that with only 30 followers on their page at the time, there was no way they could get 79,000 streams for the album, so something didn't add up. For a short time, it's to my understanding that they were banned from Spotify, but have since been let back on. The source of this controversy, however, their 2015 album Thin Black Line, has never returned. Smokey and the Mirror, if the allegations are true, tried to play Spotify and lost. But back in 2014, there was a band called Volpec who, it could be argued, tried to play Spotify and won. This is their story. The tale goes that they came up with a bit of an ingenious scheme to make some money. I'm not 100% sure if this has changed in the 8 years since, it might well have done, but back in 2014, a single stream on Spotify would make you $0.007, right? And Volpec needed some money to try and help fund their upcoming tour, so they devised a plan. For a song on Spotify to make that $0.007, it needs to be streamed for at least 30 seconds. So Volpec decided to drop an album called Sleepify, which is compiled of a bunch of songs each 30 seconds in length, and then they went to social media to ask their fans to listen to this album whilst they're going to sleep. Of course, it's silent, so it's not going to keep them up all night. Each song is 30 seconds long, so it's making them the money, and, you know, in the end, it's a win-win. Their fans complied and they flocked to Sleepify in their droves, and apparently the band made $20,000 just by people listening to a silent 30-second track. And on top of this, they promised to tour the locations that streamed it the most for completely free, which they would later do. So if you lived in an area that streamed it the most, well, you could go to one of their gigs free of charge. Of course, this did violate Spotify's terms of service, and so while the platform would call it clever and cheeky, Sleepify was eventually taken down, never to return. But it was a phenomenal idea in my opinion nonetheless. But while Sleepify is perhaps the least controversial story I have today, this next one is going to ruffle some feathers. Let's talk about Morgan Wallen, who in 2021 had a video of him emerge in which he said the N-word. This story goes without saying that it caused his music to be temporarily pulled from radios as well as music streaming services' official playlists. It wasn't said in a way that was insulting to the person it was spoken to, it was said after a night out. Wallen seemed very drunk and was walking into his house. On top of this, the person who he said this slur in reference to was white. The clip was sent into TMZ and was claimed to be some sort of doorbell camera, but on reviewing the clip you can tell that it wasn't, it was clearly someone manually recording. But this leads me to one of two conclusions. The more optimistic of these was that this nosy neighbour might have just wanted a payout from TMZ and was insistent on catching Wallen out. The more pessimistic on the flip side was that this kind of thing was common from Wallen and it happened a lot, and the neighbour had had enough and wanted to put an end to it. Wallen would go to rehab in response to this and would publicly apologise, telling his fans not to defend his actions. But whatever the case, and this is going to sound terrible, it might not have been such a bad thing for his career. Okay, no, let me explain before you attack me, because although his music was pulled from playlists and the radio, it was reported by NBC that in response to this news story breaking, Wallen saw a 327% increase in song sales and a massive 1,220% increase in digital album sales. Now, Wallen admitted that his latest album was selling quite well prior to this controversy, but obviously in response to this giant uptake in sales, well, a conversation had to be had about the type of people that were listening to his music. Now, this story the entire way through has been very dicey, so let me remind you, this is not my conversation, I am a mere messenger of this. But the idea is that the people that should be most offended by a white guy saying the N-word are black people, right? But Morgan Wallen creates country music, which at least traditionally wouldn't be classified as black music, even though you as well as I both know that music just isn't defined by race. But the argument is that it's not like his audience would have been massively impacted by this because there wouldn't have been a very large number of black people listening to him in the first place. But there might have been a large number of people listening to him that don't really care so much about the slur being used. And if you don't believe me, when asked if there was a race problem in country music, Wallen replied, "It would appear that way." But just like most people we've spoken about today, Wallen's music wouldn't be off the radios and official playlists for long, and after a while, the storm blew over, and Wallen was allowed back into the fold. It went without saying that Wallen was going to face repercussions for his actions, but in the case of our next band, well, they face repercussions, perhaps, just because of their name. This is the story of Infant Annihilator. Now, straight up, I can tell you that the topic of their name is also shared by a lot of the titles of their music, many of which I don't even think I can show you because they either have strong swear words in them or describe horribly graphic scenes, many of which, again, refer to fetuses and babies. Now, they have almost 150,000 monthly listeners, so they're by no means a small band or anything, but I don't think anyone would really be missing them. I mean, I'll be honest, their music is perhaps the worst I've ever heard. I mean, I've heard cats fighting that sounds better than what I listen to. If you were looking for an alternative to them, maybe chuck a dozen screws in a blender and turn it on, because that is a sound comparable to what I heard. But music aside, I have to be fair to them and say that there are some other bands with pretty offensive names that were never given the boot, so you've got to be consistent, right? They might have been terminated because there were too many complaints against them or something, but I guess it wouldn't really matter too much because they were back up on Spotify soon after, and if anything, this termination might have helped them in the long run because it was the most news coverage they had ever had. But by the time in a video that you get to a band called Infant Annihilator, you know you've gone too far, you've gone too deep down the rabbit hole, so with that, we're going to have to end the video. It was an otherwise quiet night on the 27th of May 2022 in Toronto, Canada. That was until 3 AM when a man of the name Saad Mustafa claims that he suddenly heard a hysterical shriek coming from nearby. The story goes that he heard a banging coming up against the wall and the sound of a man yelling, saying, "Why did you push my cat?" His gut instinct told him to investigate, and so he braved it, making his way into the hallway of his apartment where he saw what's been described as a horrific scene. There, he saw his neighbour Arvin Pasha furious and physically threatening a young woman who was pinned up against the wall. But to make matters worse, a glance down at the ground would reveal yet another young lady who appeared to have a stab wound to her neck. It was covered with a long white scarf or shawl, Mustafa said. She was on the floor lying on her back and was bleeding very, very badly. It's said that Mustafa returned to his apartment where he called the police before going back out to ask the suspect to drop his knife. Pasha would allegedly try and make a break for it, but was eventually apprehended by the police. The victims, on the other hand, would both survive the incident as the emergency services made it on time to save them. Mustafa was said to have kept pressure on the neck of the seriously injured victim just long enough for the paramedics to arrive and alleviate the situation. Mustafa said that he was shocked, as he had known Pasha for a total of 6 years, and this didn't seem like the kind of thing that he'd do. But nonetheless, Arvin Pasha, the Airbnb host, would be subject to one charge of aggravated assault involving 2 victims. These 2 victims were guests staying at his Airbnb property. Airbnb themselves would acknowledge the situation, saying that the women would be given a full refund not only for the accommodation, but their flights and other expenses too, as it seems as though they had come on a trip. It goes without saying that Pasha was immediately removed from Airbnb due to this incident, with Airbnb defending themselves by saying that incidents such as these are extremely rare. But with over 1 billion arrivals on Airbnb to date, these sorts of things can happen, though they are taken extremely seriously. Now, one of the really strange things about this case is that you might hear it and think that Pasha is just this deranged lunatic and his place was really off the books and shady and sketchy and whatnot, but it actually wasn't. He had a full business license to operate his apartment in this way. I mean, not the stabbings, but still, he could rent it out on Airbnb. Pasha wouldn't spend any time behind bars because of this, but he was given a total of 9 release conditions, including being ordered to reside with his mother, having to reside within a 10 PM to 6 AM curfew each day, having no further contact with his victims, being unable to possess any weapons, and being unable to consume alcohol or drugs without a medical prescription, just to name a few. Founded in 2008, Airbnb is an online marketplace for short homestays and accommodations. People will list their properties on there and allow complete strangers to stay there for a short period of time. However, by giving the keys of your house to people you don't know, you allow all sorts of awful things to potentially happen there. And on the flip side, by staying in the house of a complete stranger you don't know, you're opening yourself up to a list of potential dangers that might be lurking within it. In this video, we're going to talk about a number of people, homeowners and homestayers alike, that have been banned from Airbnb because of their disgraceful behaviour, just like Arvin Pasha. From a man who's been dubbed the Wolf of Airbnb to a homeowner setting up hidden cameras to spy and stalk on people, Airbnb bannings are rare, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So we're going to start off a bit lighter, and as we move through the video, each case will get more and more extreme than the last. Pasha's was a spine-chilling story for sure, but it was only our first of 7, with our next tale being of Isaiah Shahid. His story can be traced back to New Year's going into 2018. He wanted an absolute mega party. He wanted it to be off the rails, but in the end, he got more than he bargained for. So this incident took place in Seven Hills, Ohio. Yes, okay, I know, it's an Ohio case, laugh about it in the comments. But this story actually begins a few days before New Year's, because Isaiah Shahid decided to rent out an Airbnb from a man of the name Samyang Lee for a 2-night stay, which set him back about $40. Shahid, though, had come up with a plan to not only make his money back, but also make a lot more. Because after securing the property, he then took to Twitter to advertise his rager, charging a $5 cover for all attendees. The plan was now put into place, and when the big day of New Year's Eve came, it was put into action. An important piece of information that I think I should provide right now is that based on reports that I've seen, it seems as though Isaiah was only 20 as of the time of hosting this party. So whether or not it went the way that it did, he was still breaking the law nonetheless. For him to be throwing a New Year's Eve party in the USA, where there's very likely going to be a gargantuan amount of alcohol, it's illegal by design. On top of that, the people that he's going to invite to this party are likely his friends, they're likely the same age as him, so I would expect a lot of people that are aged between 18 and 22, 23, 24 to be attending this party. Obviously, in the USA, it is illegal to drink alcohol until you're 21 years of age. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that even before the party started, there's a bunch of underage drinkers that have already been invited. So that's bad enough, let alone throwing this party in a house that you've rented without telling the owner prior. In the end, it was reported that hundreds of people attended this party, with them being described as packed so tightly that it didn't appear as if there was any space for anyone to move their arms. The police approached the property to the sight of someone shutting the door in their face and locking it, with a large crowd proceeding to shout and yell at the police, swearing at them and spouting out anti-police comments. It was far too much for the Seven Hills force to handle, so they had to contact a further 4 departments, calling in reinforcements from Broadview Heights, Palmer, Brooklyn Heights and Independence. The drunk partygoers would scramble as the police made their way through the house and found the owner of the property, Samyang Lee, cowering, locked in his bedroom. Apparently, he had been the originator of the noise complaint that had the police sent there in the first place. The partygoers had identified this, and Lee claimed that there was a total of 5 attendees that tried to attack him. But despite being a victim here, Lee was also told off by the authorities because apparently he hadn't notified the city that he was renting out a room in his home. This was a safety violation as his home was never inspected prior to him renting out the room. Shahid would evade capture that fateful night, but would eventually turn himself in on a warrant for several charges, including criminal damaging, disorderly conduct, allowing underage drinking, and more. He was ordered to spend 45 days under house arrest, was given 2 years probation, and was ordered to pay $16,000, split between $15,000 in damages to the homeowner and $1,000 in court fees and fines. To top it all off, it should come as no surprise that upon hearing the news, Airbnb banned Shahid from their platform, never to return. But though you might have thought that the bannings of Pasha and Shahid were fair, many people thought that the same couldn't be said for Bethany Hallam, who was banned because of a minor crime that she had committed a decade prior. So for a video about banned Airbnb users, we really haven't spoken much yet about why people might get banned if not for something horrendous like throwing an absolutely obnoxious New Year's party or trying to stab someone. In practice, Airbnb has a list of guidelines, just like any other large social media platform, that users, both homeowners and stayers, must adhere to. These differ a lot depending on the type of Airbnb you're renting out, but to try and enforce these rules, Airbnb says on its website that it only does background checks in the USA and India, and that even these checks are infrequent. This background search is nothing more than the name and the date of birth given to them by the user who has booked the accommodation. But back in 2022, these methods would be criticised. This is because Bethany Hallam, a Pennsylvania councilperson, had booked an Airbnb in Miami for what she described as a dream birthday trip, putting $1,000 down on her accommodation, but after the platform did a background check, they would contact her to inform her that she wouldn't be allowed to use Airbnb because of a criminal records match. So what heinous crime was she said to have committed? Well, as reports go, 9 years prior to this incident, she was charged with misdemeanor possession and a DUI. She would take to social media to protest this ban, saying that 1/3 of Americans have a criminal past and that this was a form of discrimination. To add to this, even when it comes to Airbnb's own guidelines on their website, she shouldn't have been banned, as what they describe as lesser crimes, which Hallam's case was, shouldn't get you banned. It's only for the more serious crimes such as terrorism, rape and murder that are grounds for permanent termination. And so this, even by Airbnb's own definition, was a mistake. The platform would later clear the air, stating that they understand that there are many reasons why someone might have a criminal record, and so they've actually developed an appeal system so that cases like Bethany Hallam's can be considered in the future. They concluded by saying that they've reinstated Mrs. Hallam and wished her well, but since this story dropped not only 6 months ago as of me recording this video, it seems as though that in the future there is a potential that if you've got a criminal record, no matter what the charge, you have to get your case appealed first before you can book an Airbnb. And that's potentially an unfair way of doing things to some, and the right way of doing things to others. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments as we move on to our 4th story of the day. And for this next story, I want to discuss someone who I've wanted to mention on this channel for a really long time now, and that is Daniel from Hiding in My Room. So I want to give a little background about Hiding in My Room just for the uninitiated, because he is a very interesting guy. He started his YouTube channel almost a decade ago now, and what separates him from the rest of the YouTube scene is his wild content. Just by looking at the titles of his videos, you'll see that something is up here. Like literally in the last month or two, he live streamed looking for a ladyboy in Thailand for 2.5 hours, he made a video about how to cheat on your girlfriend without being caught, and he made a video about him and his girlfriend being homeless. His content is a real rabbit hole and he's been covered by YouTubers before, but the biggest of these by far was made by Elvis the Alien about 4 years ago, so I'm thinking of potentially making a more up-to-date video about him soon enough, so do let me know if you're interested in that. But more relevant to our story, in September 2020, he uploaded a YouTube video titled "I Got Banned from Airbnb," fit with the classic YouTube sigh at the very start, where he explained that he didn't know exactly why he was banned from Airbnb, but he gave evidence to suggest that he's now been completely blacklisted from the platform. He knew that if he applied for a new account, he would have to give in his ID, which has likely been blacklisted, and he didn't know why because they never told him in the termination email. But after doing some digging in his comments, it seems as though the likelihood is that he got kicked out because he was filming OnlyFans videos in these Airbnbs. This is very likely the reason, as he does in fact have an OnlyFans, but I can't verify this claim because you would be more likely to see me drop my own OnlyFans than to see me pay £10 to extensively research his. Neither is happening. But a few weeks prior to his termination, Hiding in My Room uploaded a video titled "I Got Kicked Out of My Airbnb," where he discussed exactly that. He got a message from a homeowner known as Mark saying that Mark wasn't comfortable with Daniel shooting his OnlyFans content in Mark's Airbnb. I assume that one of Hiding in My Room's fans snitched on him or something, and it's very likely that he contacted Airbnb about it, leading to the termination. It seems as though Daniel didn't tell Mark that he was shooting his OnlyFans there. And no matter what you think of OnlyFans, whether you think it's an angelic gift or whether you think it's Satan's plague, I hope that we can both agree that not telling someone that you're shooting an OnlyFans video in their property is a bit grim. Airbnb does in fact have a policy in place for this, as they say that you should charge more for porn shoots if you allow them in the first place. And you're well within your rights to kick people out if they want to shoot adult content and you're either not okay with it or haven't been notified about it. So despite Daniel claiming that he didn't know why and making the point that he always left his rooms in good condition, Airbnb's policies sided against him here. And it's to my knowledge that this was the last video he ever made on the subject. I thought it would be good to ramp up to more serious cases, so things are only getting more extreme from here on out. I brought him up at the start of the video, but it's finally time to talk about the man known as the Wolf of Airbnb. Conrad Bircher was the real name of this man. He was 31 as of the time of this news story breaking, and his case is wild. So the deal here is that this man, who's given himself the title of the Wolf of Airbnb, was sued for $1.5 million after making a habit of renting out luxury apartments, throwing parties and organising photo shoots, and then not paying for the rent. It's to my understanding that his scheme went a little something like this. He would rent out a luxury apartment that's on the market and then sublet it by putting that property on Airbnb, charging insane amounts for people to use them for these photo shoots, film shoots, music videos or parties and whatnot, and then simply taking in all of the profit. But his behaviour was even more egregious than it might first seem, because despite the fact that he would do all of this and not pay any rent, even after his tenancy at these luxury apartments was over, he would still use them to rent out these Airbnbs. So you would assume that someone would eventually go to the authorities, right? But if you did, you would be wrong. Because apparently he was working on this scheme for 3 years between February 2019 and April 2022, all the while disregarding rent payments that had been estimated to be worth $1 million. Despite the fact that all the while he's thought to have made $1.1 million from income in renting out these Airbnbs. So if he wasn't paying for rent, where was he spending his money? It was on all of the bullshit, vain and superficial luxury items, of course. Private planes, designer clothing, big cars and all the rest, you've heard it before. It's thought that he broke New York City law by leasing a total of 18 properties for short-term rentals in the years that he ran this scheme, allegedly putting a price tag as high as $97 an hour for some of these places, despite the fact that it was illegal to offer comparable rent units for less than 30 days according to New York City law, which was something that he was doing. But he wouldn't just stop there, he took cheeky levels to places never before seen. During the pandemic, he made at least 4 applications through the Federal Payment Protection Program and fraudulently received $565,000. What? But if you've seen Martin Scorsese's 2013 masterpiece, The Wolf of Wall Street, you'll know that our protagonist here is about to go from rags to riches and then back to rags. Because it was time for this wolf to turn from an alpha to a beta. A doorman at one of the properties that he rented out on Airbnb caught a glimpse of a film crew going up to the apartment. The doorman would then notify the owner of the apartment, and from there, the scheme was over. He got the needle out to euthanize this wolf. Airbnb would collaborate with the FBI to investigate these happenings and immediately banned Bircher from their platform, with him shutting down his other social media accounts later and being indicted on the 27th of October 2022. As of recording this in January 2023, we don't know how much he'll have to pay back, if anything, and we don't know how long this wolf will be caged for, if at all. Conrad Bircher is in some seriously boiling hot water, there's no getting around that. But the same thing could be said for 6 people who were arrested in North Carolina after 4 holidaymakers were stabbed in what's been described as a drug-filled party. It was in the early hours of a Monday morning, not even a month ago as of recording this, on the 11th of January 2023, when the Madison County Sheriff's Department was alerted to criminal activity at a rental Airbnb home in Marshall, a small town, roughly 150 miles from the Tennessee border, home to a modest population of only 792 people. Law enforcement discovered a grisly sight when they arrived on the scene, laying eyes upon 4 holidaymakers that had been stabbed, as well as a plethora of drugs including cannabis, magic mushrooms, and cocaine. Reports on the incident really don't go into too much detail over what led to this horrifying sequence of events, but they have confirmed that 6 people were arrested, those being Christopher Lynn Bowles, Daniel Mancella Pereira, and Jody Michelle Duthit, as well as a husband-wife duo of Richard Vincent Sikowski and Cassie Dean Sikowski, who appear to be the parents of 3 children. Then there was also J. Caleb Bell, who seems to have been charged with the most serious of these crimes. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, inflicting serious injury with intent to kill. All of the suspects were also charged on drug possession of magic mushrooms and cocaine. But I think it's important to mention that just because all 6 of these people were arrested at the same time, that doesn't automatically mean that they were all arrested in connection to the stabbings, because they might have just been arrested in connection to the drugs. The police, however, did not mention in the arrest report whether drugs had any impact on the violence that occurred on that fateful Monday morning. They did confirm, however, that all of the victims, though hospitalized, were alive as of the media picking up the story. Airbnb would immediately ban the user who booked the property, though it's not said in the reports what his name was, nor if he was one of the people who were arrested. Airbnb also stated that they would be providing support for the host of the property, whose house had now become the scene of a crime. A disturbing tale from start to finish, just like our next case. When you think of a disgraceful Airbnb story, this next one has to be up there with the creepiest of them all. Brace yourselves if you want to hear it, because if you can't handle this source, you don't have to. This photograph of an Airbnb cabin might look innocuous enough, but it was actually managed by an Airbnb homeowner who allegedly took more than 2,000 photos and videos of people who were staying in his property without them knowing. The allegations are absolutely disgraceful for sure. Jay Ali is the man in question here. He was 54 years old as of the time that this news story broke and was a resident of Comfort, Texas, which is probably the wettest town name I've ever heard. But Ali was probably wetting himself when he realised that if he could rent out his cabin to residents, he could then spy on them in all sorts of compromising positions. And that is exactly what he allegedly did in this Airbnb nightmare story. Reports I found online say that these cameras had been set up for a total of 9 months prior to them being found, and they would also specify that he was eventually discovered by a male guest who might have been a bit paranoid. He had allegedly been looking up online how to spot hidden recording devices when he decided to look around the cabin. And that's when he found a secret camera in what was meant to look like a power adapter and Wi-Fi router. All the while, a female guest that he was with was in the shower. This camera was directed towards the bed. And with that said, I'm sure that you might be able to guess what the intentions behind that camera placement were. The police would be informed, and they would search his electronic devices, so phones, tablets, laptops and the sorts, and that's when they found roughly 2,100 photographs and videos of people fully nude, partially nude, and having sex. Bianca Zuniga Goldwater, representing 17 of the people who stayed at Ali's Airbnb, said that the situation was like a real-life scary movie. Ali would face 15 lawsuits that accuse him of emotional distress and intentionally invading privacy. But as far as I know, there hasn't actually been a verdict yet. If there has been one, I couldn't find it on the internet. Even if I'm sure that somewhere in those 2,000 photographs and videos, there must be a tiny little Scooby clue of evidence. Even still, you guys know the drill by now, it would be absolutely bonkers if Airbnb did not take Ali off of their platform because of this. Obviously, it goes without saying that spying on naked guests for 9 months will get you taken off Airbnb. It was in late November of 2022 when news outlets reported the sickening events of an incident that took place not long before concerning a woman who's been dubbed as DC Karen. This angry young woman was videoed hurling horribly racist remarks at her black Uber driver, calling him a slave as well as using the N-word towards him. At one point she yells, "I'm your fucking boss," and also physically lays her hands on the innocent driver despite the man trying to create some distance between himself and her. This footage, recorded from a building that overlooked the racist rant, captured the victim eventually having had enough of the racist insults hurled towards him, with the man calling her a bitch, to which she seems to have taken great offense. At one point, the driver pulls out his phone to record her, once again getting all up in his face, calling him a piece of shit, and repeating the N-word 6 times in a row towards him, also calling him schizophrenic and illiterate. The driver responds by calling her a Karen and saying that she's going to end up on the internet because of this video, but the racist Karen seems to not care in the slightest. Really, there's only so much I can tell you about it, so I'm going to play a clip now that should give you a little flavour of how this interaction played out.
Hey there, Karen. You're gonna be all over the internet as a racist woman.
Yeah, I am now.
I know. You've been
now.
one. You've been one.
I did nothing
You've been
wrong.
one. What am I again?
Absolutely
Tell me what I am.
wrong.
Tell me what I am. Exactly. Say it.
Now, you might be wondering to yourself what started this bigoted tirade, and the answer might shock you. As it turns out, it seems as though this freakout started because of a phone charger. The woman brings up the fact that her phone was low and that she had asked for a charger, but whether it be because he didn't have one on him or because he justifiably didn't want to give it over to her, it was a mere phone charger that set her off. The rooftop video would be uploaded to Twitter, where it would rake in more than 5 million views, and because of its virality, the footage eventually made its way to Uber, who would obviously ban the DC Karen from the app. But little more else other than that has been released on the situation. The woman's identity, for the most part, has been kept under wraps, despite various articles and responses asking who she was and what race she belonged to. You know, the important stuff. Either way, whether or not she faced legal action for this incident, we don't know. It seems as though Uber is the only one to know who this woman was. A fascinating, yet quite saddening story for sure, but that's just one of the many that we have in today's video. Still to come, we have a story about the time that Uber was banned in London, and a tale about a man who drunkenly assaulted his Uber driver and then sued him? Over the past 10 years, Uber has burst onto the scene as one of, if not the leading rideshare app. The rating system allows you to match up with pleasant drivers, and the prices are determined beforehand, so many people are ditching taxis in favour of the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. However, getting into a car with a person that you don't know can lead to some potentially dangerous or distressing situations. And on the flip side, letting someone that you don't know into your own personal vehicle can also lead to its own problems. And so in this video, we're doing a deep dive into Uber to uncover some of the juiciest reasons why drivers and passengers alike have been banned from the app. So without further ado, let's get into it. I think that a good place to start is by talking about Travis Kalanick, because many of the themes here are going to be a recurring thread throughout many of the following stories. If you're unfamiliar with Kalanick, he actually co-founded Uber with Canadian entrepreneur Garrett Camp. Kalanick was also the CEO of Uber for 7 years between 2010 and 2017. So how could a man who had such a pivotal role in starting up and running the damn company be banned from it? Let's discuss. So Uber was founded in 2009 by Camp and Kalanick because the two had found taxis in San Francisco where they lived to be frustrating and overpriced. Over the next few years, it became what we know it as today, but if we take things back to 2014, the company was leading the way for the future of transportation, and so competitors started to pop up. Reports say that it was around this time that Kalanick began to rule with an iron fist, and this would shortly become a poison to the company. It was reported that there was a bro culture forming at the company and that toxic masculinity was rife. Kalanick would also joke that he gained plenty of female attention from becoming a billionaire CEO, saying that the app should have been called Boober. However, this source of culture in the company might have been to the overall detriment of Kalanick, because it's since been reported that sexual harassment and misconduct was commonplace at Uber headquarters during Kalanick's time at the top. So this is just a quick rundown of the sexual scandals that he and his company were alleged to have taken part of during his time as CEO. Firstly, back in 2015, when in Korea, Kalanick went to a karaoke bar which also doubled as a place to pick up an escort. Many people have since criticised this as being an unprofessional thing to do. Secondly, a couple of years ago, there was a shortly lived Uber promotion in Lyon that apparently would attempt to match up riders to hot chick drivers as they made their way across the city. Thirdly, and most seriously of all, between 2017 and 2018, there were reportedly 6,000 cases of sexual assault in the USA related to Uber. Now obviously for that last one, Kalanick was not responsible for the actions of literally thousands of people committing those deeds, but at the same time, as CEO, it's his responsibility to take action to try and prevent this thing from happening in the first place, let alone as often as it did. In early 2017, the final nail in the coffin would come in the form of a former engineer named Susan Fowler, who worked for the company between November 2015 and December 2016. She came forward with a blog post that outlined the fact that women in the company were mistreated and disregarded for the most part, if they were even hired to begin with. When Fowler left the company, she said that out of the over 150 people on the site reliability engineer teams, only 3% of them were women. By mid-2017, the investors had had enough, and after facing pressure from 5 of the largest of them, Kalanick would eventually step down from being CEO, and around Christmas of 2019, he would step down from the board too. Now, Kalanick is still allowed to book an Uber, yes, he's not been banned from using the service, but he has been banned from essentially all positions of power within a company that he co-founded. So it's kind of cheating, yes, but I did think it would be appropriate to bring him up here because, as I said earlier, many of the themes in that story are going to be reoccurring throughout many of our later ones. But from a story that was kept secret for the longest time to one that was broadcast all over the world, let's talk about Jason Gargak. He was a then 32-year-old Uber driver from St. Louis, Missouri, whose life might have turned to Missouri after he was fired because he live streamed his rides on Twitch. That was such a shit joke. Cut it. Cut it. So you might be a bit confused how this is even possible, because I'd say that there's a good chance that you've seen videos of people in the past who record videos of toxic passenger interactions and whatnot. These used to be quite popular on YouTube a couple of years ago, but if you've noticed, they've become a little bit less common, and that's because Uber back in 2018 updated their policies towards broadcasting other people in your car. The rules were changed so that drivers are allowed to record their passengers for the purposes of fulfilling transportation services. This means that if a passenger wants to do something to try and get you in trouble, you would have verifiable evidence that you are innocent. However, posting these to the internet is the problem that Uber wanted to stamp out. The comments on the Daily Mail article that reported on this made the point that a lot of people that take Ubers are drunk people on a night out, and of course they're going to say some stupid stuff that could get them in trouble or that they wouldn't want others to see, let alone thousands of viewers on a live stream. Many people found this to be an invasion of privacy, and there were a few instances where people were having private conversations in the back of this Uber without knowing that what they were talking about was being broadcast all over the internet. And this is despite the fact that these people weren't causing harm to the driver or being a nuisance, they were just chatting some shite and having their conversations leaked. Gargak, known on Twitch as Just Smurf, livestreamed roughly 700 of his rides, all the while people in his chat were making sexual remarks at his passengers as well as mocking them, all without their knowledge. Now, the interesting thing about this is, depending on where you live in the world, recording someone without their consent is going to be treated differently, because in some places you just need one party to consent, and in other places you need both parties to consent. And in the case of Gargak, he lived in Missouri, which only has a one-way consent rule. Gargak said that he wanted to capture the reality of Uber and Lyft. These were natural interactions capturing authentic human nature. However, one female rider of Gargak's claims to have felt violated and embarrassed that her conversations had been broadcast. And since Uber doesn't have to abide by state law in regards to the consent of video being filmed, what Gargak was doing was violating their policies, and so Just Smurf was banned from Uber. Of course, he wasn't the only Uber streamer, but his story became very big news when it dropped, and in the time since, this kind of live streaming has largely become a thing of the past. But here's something interesting, because even before this kind of thing was banned, it was the subject of controversy. For this next story, I want to take you back to January of 2016, when an Uber driver was reportedly sued by a now former Taco Bell corporate manager for $5 million for recording him without his consent. However, everything is definitely not as it seems with this story, so let's talk about this $5 million lawsuit. Now, you might think that it's fair that Uber drivers record their rides as long as they keep their footage. You might think that Uber drivers should be allowed to broadcast the footage and audio wherever they want to, or maybe you think that it's a complete invasion of privacy and these recordings shouldn't be allowed no matter what the context. But if we take things back to November 2015, news outlets reported on a video that surfaced online showing an Uber driver known as Edward Cabin driving his car and eventually pulling over with the Taco Bell executive Benjamin Golden in the back, clearly intoxicated. Cabin said that Golden wouldn't tell him where he was meant to be dropped off, and so Cabin just told him to get out. Golden would proceed to assault his driver, punching and slapping him across the head before getting pepper sprayed by Cabin and having the police called on him. Golden was later charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Cabin, on the other hand, would upload the footage to YouTube where it would bring in more than 2 million views. Following the clip surfacing, Taco Bell would fire the former marketing executive and encouraged him to seek professional help. Cabin, on the other hand, said that the emotional distress from the incident made it so that he felt as though he could no longer work for Uber. And though Golden would later apologize for his actions, Cabin would go on to sue Golden, seeking compensation for the loss of his job as an Uber driver, as after the attack, Cabin states that he was too nervous to continue behind the wheel. Cabin was also seeking to recover his medical expenses. But in a completely unexpected turn of events, Golden would then countersue, seeking damages of $5 million because Golden states that the video caused him severe emotional distress, humiliation, anxiety, the loss of his employment, and the inability to get another job. His lawsuit alleges that posting the video of the incident online was so extreme as to exceed all bounds of that usually tolerated in a civilized community. Now, I'm obviously not a lawyer, I've never had any interactions with lawyers, so please do take this with a grain of salt. This is just from what I've interpreted from the internet. But apparently, the law applies to confidential communications where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. People out in public may not have the same reasonable expectation of privacy, but whether or not they do depends on the circumstances of the case. Thus, the Californian court hearing Golden's case will be tasked with answering the question of whether or not Golden had a reasonable expectation of privacy as a passenger in an Uber car. If the court decides that he does, then Cabin could be liable for damages. Unfortunately, in the years since this incident occurred and the lawsuits were announced, as much as I've tried, I couldn't find anything about the outcome of the lawsuits online. From what I've seen from people on Quora that claim to have legal backgrounds, it seems that though he had a claim, it was unlikely that anything was to come from this because this would be an instance that recording footage of passengers would be acceptable. And since Uber's terms of service on broadcasting this footage didn't come until later, it doesn't reflect so poorly on Cabin, but at the same time, Golden never consented in a state which has laws against this kind of thing, so I don't want to speculate on what happened here too much. I do feel as though that if Golden would have won his lawsuit, we would have heard about it by now. So again, as much as I don't want to speculate, I can't imagine that Golden won his case. Especially not for the $5 million that he was asking for compared to Cabin's $25,000. But you never really know, do you? So in the small chance that there are any lawyers watching this video, or perhaps some lawyer students, drop some knowledge in the comments, let me know because I'd love to read about it as we move on to this next case. And for this next story, we have a similar situation. It appears as though aggressive and potentially violent Uber rides are more common than you might think. This next story is a bit of a shocker because while yes, this was another physical altercation between an Uber driver and their passenger, in this case, their passenger was actually a doctor. I want to talk about doctors for a second before we delve into the meat of this story because they have to be one of, if not the most dignified profession in the world, right? You literally save lives for a living. You've got to be thoroughly educated. It's a high-stress job, so you've got to keep your calm under pressure at all times. But in the case of Dr. Anjali Ramkasoon, dignified, educated, level-headed, none of these words could be used to describe how she came off in this video, where she's depicted as physically laying her hands on her Uber driver, infiltrating his vehicle and mishandling his personal property. The video is a bad look for the Miami woman who tried to clear the air after the story went viral. She appeared on Good Morning America to shed some light on her state of mind as the incident played out, saying that she's incredibly remorseful for her actions and that she finds it impossible to watch the video. She claims that the person in this video isn't her day-to-day, this was her at her absolute lowest. She claims that she was extremely stressed that day, having broken up with her boyfriend of 2.5 years minutes before the incident took place, and having been told that her father had been admitted to hospital that very day. She'd also been drinking that day too, perhaps because of those reasons, having booked an Uber as to not drink and drive, and so she had an altered state of mind too. Perhaps you see these factors as an excuse. I think that even the most sane person in the world could just be one bad day away from having a complete breakdown. But going this far? I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, right? At least from what I've seen online, many people are just not buying it. A lot of them say, yeah, bad things happen to everyone, the world has some truly cruel plot twists, but even those who have gone through much worse than her haven't gone and attacked their Uber drivers. So is this really an excuse? It should be said that a lot has happened in the fallout of this public freakout. Firstly, and perhaps most obviously, she was placed on administrative leave because of this. A lot of people on social media that I've seen have made the point that this kind of temperament just isn't acceptable for a doctor. You surely wouldn't want to put your health and safety in the hands of someone who acts like this. If her defense was true, if it was extreme stress that caused her to act like this, she probably needed the time off regardless. But while she was on her leave, her place of employment decided that she shouldn't come back, and so she was fired from her job. In terms of legal ramifications, Dr. Ramkissoon was fortunately spared from anything serious. The man that she attacked eventually agreed to not push charges. She said that she apologized to him and that she's thankful that he handled the situation the way that he did. Dr. Ramkissoon would, however, face much more serious backlash from people on the internet. I read that she had her address leaked, which just isn't okay, and I also read that people online were sending her the most terrible, hateful messages that you could even think of sending to another person, which for obvious reasons I will not be repeating here. I'll let you imagine the type of things that someone on the internet might say to someone that they don't like. But from a dispute between two individuals to a dispute involving one of the biggest cities in the world, it's coming home for our next tale as we set our sights to my home country of the UK. More specifically, we're taking aim at the English capital of London to discuss the time that Uber was banned in the city. Now, the majority of my audience is American, so I'm going to assume that most people watching this video didn't know that this was a thing, mainly because I didn't know it was a thing and I'm from the UK. But from the underground to above ground trains to buses, trams, normal bicycles, penny farthing bicycles, ferrying across the Thames, flying with an umbrella, and of course the roads, there's a lot of ways to get around London. However, back in September 2017, London was about to kick out the ride-sharing app, saying that Uber was not fit and proper in its compliance with transport regulations. For that reason, it was announced that by the end of September, when Uber's license to operate in London expired, it was not going to be renewed. So why, you ask, did Transport for London say that Uber wasn't in compliance with its transport regulations? Well, TfL said that Uber have a lack of corporate responsibility when it comes to their drivers, arguing that their background checks are not thorough enough, and that the company has had a history of failing to report sexual assault incidents by these drivers. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, came out to support TfL's decisions, saying that though he wants London to be at the forefront of innovation and technology, this will never come at the expense of potential safety concerns for the London populace. Companies have to play by the rules or they don't get to play at all. Obviously, a big decision like this has a lot of moving parts, because by banning the company, this would come at an impact of potential consumers. At the time, there was an estimated 3.5 million Londoners who used Uber. And then on top of that, there was the estimated 30 to 40,000 London-based Uber drivers who would be out of a job if the company was banned. With that said, the gravity of this situation should not be ignored. In the 12 months between May 2015 and May 2016, it was reported that the Metropolitan Police investigated 32 Uber drivers for rape and sexual assault. Furthermore, according to a Vox article I found whilst researching the story, it writes that the Sunday Times obtained a letter by Inspector Bill Billany, head of the Metropolitan Police's taxi and private hire unit. And this letter claimed that Uber chose not to notify police after being aware of criminal activity among its drivers on more than half a dozen occasions. The article goes on to say that Uber's background and medical checks allegedly do not live up to the same standard as traditional taxis. And even more, there was a flaw identified in Uber's system that was pointed out by TfL that allowed unauthorized people to upload their photographs to legitimate drivers' accounts, and that then allowed them to pick up passengers. Obviously, this was a huge security risk. Allegedly, 24 drivers had shared their accounts to 20 other people, leading to more than 14,000 unauthorized rides. You might ask, were these the consequences of Travis Kalanick's controversial and frat boyish leadership? There could be an argument for that, if you believe it's true, and I'd argue that it's coincidental to say the least that these sorts of problems were around when he was CEO, and then when he resigned in 2019, these sorts of problems began to be dealt with. By 2020, Westminster Magistrates Court decided that though Uber had historic failings, it had addressed its concerns, and Uber was once again allowed to operate inside London town. Then, in March 2022, Uber was granted a 2.5-year license to operate inside the English capital, and so this is one banning that has since been overturned. 17 years, 11 months, 5 days. That's how long it's been since Me at the Zoo was uploaded, becoming YouTube's very first video. YouTube as a platform is very nearly an adult now, and in this time it's become home to potentially 1 billion videos, or maybe even more. Most of these videos will go relatively unseen, unremembered by the masses and uncared for by its viewers. But, of course, a small handful will be watched and spoken about, for better or for worse. Some of these videos will be life-changing, and some of them will be such a mistake that even their creators will go back on them, erasing them from existence and trying to make it seem like they never happened at all. In this video, we're working backwards in time to talk about some of YouTube's most infamous deleted content. Content that was either deleted by the creators or by YouTube itself, including the very earliest deleted video that was uploaded mere minutes after Me at the Zoo. So without further ado, let's talk about some of the most infamous and fascinating deleted videos of all time. And we're going to start off with one that's quite recent and also one of the most famous ever, that being Alan Walker's no copyright sound songs. You guys must know Alan Walker, right? He's been described as a DJ/producer phenom, creating wildly popular trap, house and electronic music. He has more than 24 million monthly listens on Spotify, he has the most subscribed YouTube channel in Norway, and he's taken in over 12 billion views on YouTube throughout all of his videos. One of the largest sources of these views might have come from his work with No Copyright Sounds, one of the biggest channels in the world with more than 33 million subscribers. His songs on No Copyright Sounds raked in literally hundreds of millions of views, but Alan Walker was really the golden child of the channel because compared to any other musician they ever featured, Alan Walker was consistently getting the highest amounts of views. He released 3 songs on the channel, those being Force, Spectre and of course, Faded. These songs were wildly popular, with Force apparently taking in over 100 million views, then Spectre garnering somewhere in the 200 to 300 million views range, and last but of course not least, Fade being the most popular video on the No Copyright Sounds channel because before its erasure it had 444 million views. But of course, by watching this video, you know that these songs are no longer on YouTube. I mean, they are. If you look up Faded, you can now see that the music video is sitting at 3.4 billion views. But in November 2021, 6 years after first collaborating with each other, Alan Walker's contract having his songs up on NCS was expired, and the two parties couldn't come together to forge a new one. When the two first got together, NCS was still in its infancy, and Alan Walker was nowhere near as large as he is today. It seemed like quite the ideal match, and without NCS, who's to say that Faded, Spectre or Force would have become quite as successful? And it worked the other way around too, because let me remind you that these songs were huge for NCS. You can still see re-uploads on YouTube that are trying to mimic the style and branding of NCS, and let me remind you again that these songs are not gone from YouTube entirely, just the original versions on No Copyright Sounds. These are all now deleted. But that's a small story compared to our next one, because our next channel had all of their past videos deleted. I'm talking about Super JoJo, and unless you're a parent, you probably haven't heard of them before. This channel had more than 20 million subscribers, was one of the top 25 animation channels on the platform, and would have been getting a fair amount of money from YouTube. But in September 2021, they would be terminated from the platform, with all of their videos being lost to the void. And in the process, they became one of, if not the largest channel to have ever been forcefully deleted. And let me tell you right now, the reason why is extremely fascinating. So let's discuss the sequence of events that led to the termination of Super JoJo. I've actually spoken about YouTube Kids content before in the past, quite recently actually, but this story must have slipped through the cracks. To set the scene, I think that CoComelon needs very little introduction. They're the largest kids channel on YouTube, they have 156 million subscribers, they might negatively impact your child's development, the science is still out on that. But it's fair to say that even though they just repackage old nursery rhymes for their content, at the very least, outside of the songs which are public domain anyway, their work is original. But we're going to play a little game right now. I'm going to show you a CoComelon baby and a Super JoJo baby, and you have to tell me which one is which. Yeah, really similar, aren't they? And you probably know now where I'm going with this. The reason why Super JoJo was terminated was that they had been allegedly infringing on CoComelon's copyrights. CoComelon took the Boo Boo song as an example, as though when you're listening to this song, you can tell that each version is different. CoComelon's is much slower compared to Super JoJo's, and the two have fairly different lyrics, but just by looking at the animation, one is clearly modelled after the other. They have the same shots, the same zooms, the exact same scenarios, there's no question about it. The whole situation caused CoComelon to pursue legal action, where they claimed that sometimes Super JoJo would copy them frame for frame, and if you took the Boo Boo song for an example, it's hard to say that they were wrong. The document that described this was more than 20 pages in length, and one of the arguments was that Super JoJo found this copying to be extremely lucrative. Baby Bus Network, the Chinese company that owns Super JoJo, have reported revenues of over $100 million the year prior to the deletion of Super JoJo's videos, and this all culminated in Super JoJo having its channel terminated by YouTube due to multiple third-party claims of copyright infringement. You might be surprised to hear, however, that Super JoJo is now back on YouTube on a channel that was created on the 24th of March 2021. Perhaps they knew that they were soon to be deleted and so planned ahead. This new channel has almost 3 million subscribers and has generated roughly 80 million views so far. One of the key differences this time around though is that it has human hosts, or at the very least it did at a point in time. They stopped uploading for about a year before coming back a few weeks ago, and their content seems to once again be reverted back to purely animated stuff. So time will only tell if this time they stay out of trouble. So heading back to perhaps a different era of YouTube now, the year is 2019, and Machinima, one of the largest channels on the site, has mysteriously had its entire back catalogue disappear. If you're my age, you've definitely heard of them, but if you're a bit younger, you might not have, so let me give you a quick rundown on who they are. Machinima were a gaming network created by Hugh Hancock in the year 2000. If you've been on the platform for a while, you would know that back in the early days, it was very difficult to monetize your videos, especially if you were a gaming channel. Back then, only 15 years ago, copyright laws when it came to games were a lot different to how they are now, and people were hit with strikes and sometimes even had their channels taken down for merely playing a video game. If you were an old school gaming YouTuber before the year 2012, you would essentially have to join a network because the YouTube Partner Program just wasn't around at the time. There wasn't any apparatus to monetize your content. And that's where Machinima came in, as they had the tools to prevent gaming companies from trying to take your content down, as well as the tools to monetize your vids. On top of this, it was instantly one of the largest channels on the site, and so it made sense for creators to sign their 3-year deal and hop on there because your content could now be potentially seen by a way larger audience than you'd have on your own channel. Just sign the contract, give away 40% of your ad revenue, and live the dream. Yeah, did I mention that you can only keep 60% of the revenue that your content made? Machinima was an MCN, and if you've heard of the term, you know that they tend to be bad news. This was something that Pyrocynical, PewDiePie, Ross Boomsocks, as well as countless others would find out the hard way. And I don't want to drag this story on too long because it was evident that Machinima was eventually going to fail. Once monetization became more widespread on YouTube, it was only a matter of time. Once gamers could take control of their revenue, Machinima had an appointment booked with the Reaper. And day by day in the mid-2010s, creators' contracts would expire and Machinima would lose a little more money, and a little more, and a little more, and by January 2019, it was too much. Machinima at that point had uploaded more than 26,000 videos, but had them all erased and laid off 81 employees. These days, if you go to Machinima's channel, you'll see that they're still one of the most subscribed in the world. They still have 11.6 million subs, but no content. The only thing left up on their channel is a playlist titled Minecraft The Noob Adventures, and so in January 2019, that was where Machinima left us. Going back even further now, I'm about to bring up a name that you probably haven't thought about in roughly 8 years, and that name is Nicole Arbour. If you don't know who this woman is, consider yourself lucky. But if you do know her, surely you'll know about her viral rant video, Dear Fat People. What you might not know, however, is that if you head onto her channel today, you'll notice that this video is no longer there. So what was it? Why was it so controversial, and why is it now deleted? It was September 2015 when this video was uploaded to YouTube, and though you can see re-uploads of it today, you'll notice that there are a ton of responses online from fat and skinny people alike. It's also got a lot of responses from online news articles such as The Guardian, The Times, and The Daily Mail. If you've never seen the video, it's a 6-minute sequence of jokes which seem to be much more of a roasting session or a rant. She's unashamedly blunt. She was honest with her opinions, and so to some, she was finally the person who had the guts to say what others were thinking about fat people, and to others, she seemed cruel and hurtful. Just in case you haven't seen it or you've forgotten what this video was about, I'm going to play a few clips now so you can get a little flavour for what kind of things were being said.
Are you gonna tell the doctor that they're being mean and fat shaming you when they say you have fucking heart disease? Big boned isn't a thing. Fat shaming. Who came up with that? That's fucking brilliant. Yes, shame people who have bad habits until they fucking stop. Fat shaming. I don't feel bad for you because you are taking your body for granted.
So yeah, personally, I always found Nicole Arbour to be quite unfunny. She seemed to me a bit like Sweet D from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But even having said that, the reception in the comments section of the re-upload that I found was a lot more positive than I remember it being a couple of years back. Just taking a look at the comments, if we take the jokes aside and just look at the message she was sending, some people seem to think that she had no leg to stand on, perhaps she had always been skinny and never had to deal with weight problems. Some people are saying that what she said was invalid, or that some of her points, such as encouraging fat shaming, is dangerous. Again, this is a roast or a rant, she is being sincere in this video. Others, however, have taken a different approach to it, and I've actually seen a fair amount of comments that have claimed that years down the road, it was this video that had an impact on them, helping them get their weight back on track. These people claim that their friends and family had a difficult time communicating this to them, and so it was this video that was a sobering reality to help their weight loss. And I thought to myself for a while why there was such a more positive reaction to the re-upload compared to the original 8 years prior. Perhaps in the time since the original video dropped, there have been societal changes where people are now more willing to be blunt with obese people, but more likely in my opinion is that people are seeking out this video now, and you wouldn't likely seek out a video that you hated, but you would for one that you agreed with. And that leaves us with the million-dollar question, which is, why was Dear Fat People deleted? And the answer is, I don't know. My assumption would be that this video was deemed as bullying and was removed by YouTube itself, because in the years since this video dropped, YouTube have become a bit more slap happy in removing this kind of content. To the best of my knowledge, Nicole Arbour has never come out to explain what happened to it, but it is a bit strange. After the success of Dear Fat People, Arbour made a bit of a series out of it, creating videos such as Dear Black People, Dear Feminists, Dear Parents, and Dear Refugees. Yeah, that last one sounds a bit dicey, but these videos are all still up on Arbour's channel. Arbour herself seems quite similar in attitude to how she was back then, so I don't think that she took it down because she's changed her opinions dramatically. No videos or articles were made about the deletion because I assume by the time it was removed, the video was just an afterthought in people's minds. I think this is the first video covering it. But if you want a timestamp on when the video was removed, I looked at the re-uploader's channel on Social Blade, and the Dear Fat People is by far his most popular. So I would guess that at some point in mid-June of 2022, either Arbour deleted her video or it was removed by YouTube, because there's a clear rise in views at this point. But as you'll come to discover throughout the rest of this video, there have been so many classic videos such as this that changed the landscape of YouTube for better or for worse, whose original versions have now been deleted forever. I suppose that's just the way it is. Once again, we're heading back to an earlier era of YouTube now. This next video is more than a decade old, so there'll be a good chunk of you guys, myself included, that prior to this would have never heard of this next video before. And though it didn't leave as much of a mark on the internet like a lot of the other ones we're speaking about today, it did cause just as much outrage at the time. This was Rick Perry's Strong advertisement. The year was 2011, and Barack Obama was in the early stages of his re-election campaign, and a number of Republicans sought to be on the ticket to try and take him down. Yeah, leave it to the British guy to try and explain this election. This election in particular seemed a bit more bitter than the one previous. I mean, don't get me wrong, this was nothing compared to the past 2 elections, but there were some people like Rick Perry who thought that the past 4 years under Obama had been a travesty. Perry, for those of you who don't know, is a now 73-year-old Republican politician who served as the governor of Texas for 15 years between 2000 and 2015. He was also the Secretary of Energy from 2017 to 2019, but back in 2012 as well as later in 2016, he would run for president in 2 campaigns that ended in swift defeat. When making this video, he was still in the running for the 2012 election, but his words here were some of the most honest and open, yet controversial I have ever seen.
But you don't need to be in the pew every Sunday to know that there's something wrong in this country when gays can serve openly in the military, but our kids can't openly celebrate Christmas or pray in school.
Yeah, those were the kinds of things that he was saying. You're either very for it or very against it. I doubt there was much of a middle ground here. Throughout the message, Perry vows to end Obama's war on religion, he criticizes homosexuals in the military, and he says that he wants to make America strong again. What Perry said seemed to strike a chord with YouTube because although today you can't see the original video, you can see endless amounts of people reacting to it and responding to his message. And it's generally safe to say that most people on YouTube were heavily against what he had to say, and the thing is, this is one of those videos that immediately became out of date because once Rick Perry failed to secure the Republican nomination, it was just irrelevant, it didn't matter anymore, even less so after the election ended. So this is a video that's since become forgotten about, a dusty relic that I've dug up, but one whose original existence has been vanquished. Because, as I said, you can't see the original video anymore. It got a lot of heat, so perhaps Perry just wanted to delete it after he was eliminated from the race. This is a mystery to me just as much as it is to you, but my guess is that YouTube was once again responsible here. The only semblance of the original video that I can find is a 2015 entry to the Wayback Machine. Back then, the video had 9 million views and 28,000 likes compared to 810,000 dislikes. For this next story, we're once again taking things back even further to talk about one of the earliest viral videos on YouTube. One that I'm sure a lot of you guys know, but you might not know that the original video as well as the channel that it was uploaded on are now gone forever. Again, if you've ever heard of this video before, you probably haven't thought about it in about a decade, but there's a surprising amount to this, at least compared to other early viral videos. This video was uploaded in 2007 on a channel called Chris Crocker. This channel was owned by Cara Cunningham, who has since come out as transgender. In this, she's passionately defending Britney Spears' comeback performance at the MTV Music Video Awards, and to say that this video was an instant hit would be an understatement. At a point in time, this was in the top 100 most viewed videos on the site prior to being deleted, taking in over 205 million views on YouTube as well as 50 million on MySpace. Cunningham would go on the Maury Povich show as of a result of her popularity and had her time in the limelight. By 2015, however, Cunningham would upload a video to Facebook explaining that the Britney video was in the past and that toxic comments had gotten too much to handle. And so, with 434,000 subscribers and almost 300 million views, the channel as well as all of its videos were scrubbed from the site. The Leave Britney Alone video was later sold as an NFT in April 2021 for $44,000, a sentence that's horribly dated not even 2 years later. And so it joins David at the Dentist, which sold for $11,000, as well as Nyan Cat, which sold for $600,000, and Charlie Bit My Finger, which was bought for more than $750,000. And therefore, even if Cunningham's channel was not deleted in 2015, I think there'd be very little chance that this video would still be around. Of course, it's hard for these viral videos to ever be erased entirely off the internet, but at least the original versions are now all gone. These YouTube artifacts, whether you know it or not, some of them are becoming buried deep under the surface. And this takes us to the earliest days of the site. We've gone from modern YouTube to the edgy days of the mid-2010s, to the early 2010s where the site was really starting to take shape, to the classic viral videos of the late 2000s, and now we're going back, as far back as you can go, to the very first video ever uploaded. Obviously, this was me at the zoo, uploaded by Javed Karim back in 2005. But if you've ever looked at Javed's channel called Jord, you might notice that he only has one video up there. Have you ever thought to yourself if this is the only video that he ever uploaded? And if so, why would he create a website that he doesn't use? The truth is that he did use it. It's actually thought that George would create more than 100 videos between April 2005 and January 2010. Of these, about 15 to 20 have been recovered and re-uploaded on YouTube. And though I'm not going to show you all of them in this video, I am going to give you a quick little rundown of what I found, what this means, and I'll also link a playlist in the description that has all of the found videos on it. Firstly, there are a lot of plane videos here. Like, it seems as though that George was a real fan of them, a real aviation aficionado. He also uploaded a lot of weird films and PSAs from the 1940s and 50s, like Anti-Communism Movie and How to Date. But the thing that I found most interesting, and I'm about to drop a bombshell on you, Me at the Zoo is kind of a fraud. Okay, before you hate me, allow me to explain. Firstly, although it will definitely go down in history, Me at the Zoo was not George's most popular video early on. In June 2005, his video Under the Bridge was his first to hit 10,000 views. In December 2005, his video Computer-Generated Animation of Water was his first to hit 100,000 views. Then in June 2007, his video Extremely Short Runway 747 Takeoff was his first to hit 1 million views. And believe it or not, it was only in March 2011 that Me at the Zoo became his most viewed video. By then, he only had 5 videos left on his channel, one by one deleting all of his others. By mid-2012, Me at the Zoo was his last video left. Another bombshell I'm about to drop on you is that though Me at the Zoo was definitely the first video ever uploaded on YouTube, what about the second? Well, there's a very real possibility that this was also a George video, this one titled Rolling Down a Hill, which was supposedly uploaded on the same day. It's hard to say for certain because this was almost 20 years ago and it has since been deleted. But firstly, this could have a claim to be the second oldest video ever on YouTube, and additionally, if this was in fact uploaded on the same day, if George just wanted to upload 2 videos, who's to say that in another universe, in another life, this was our Me at the Zoo? Did George just randomly upload these videos one at a time, or do you think that he had a thought process behind things? Because Me at the Zoo is obviously of much higher prestige. Rolling Down a Hill does the exact same thing as Me at the Zoo. It's a perfect example of where YouTube came from. And though I will always love Me at the Zoo, let's never forget about its aborted brother who is taken off this earth far too soon. So that's it from me. If you enjoyed this, why not check out my video on Terminated YouTube channels? If you loved this, I'm sure you'll love that one too. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and apart from that, thank you for watching and I'll see you later. So there we have it. If you made it this far, you might be asleep, but if you're awake, thank you very much for watching. It's been an absolutely wild ride, and I'm so excited to bring more episodes of the Book of the Band to you. This series changed the channel. It saved it, actually. So it's been almost a year now. I thought it'd be an appropriate time to upload this. I really hope you enjoyed all 10 of these videos, and if you did and you're somehow not sick of me yet, why not check out my video on the ugly truth of Barbie? It's a fantastic video in my opinion, but it really didn't perform too well, so I want to drum up a bit more buzz about it, because I think it deserves it. I would wholeheartedly recommend checking it out. So aside from that, I want to once again thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.